It was the third year of Ethan Cole and Sophia Bell's marriage when she was reported killed in action. Her twin sister, Chloe, had brought back a blood-stained service medal, her voice raspy as she told him, "Ethan, Sophia, she's not coming back." He'd collapsed on the spot. When he woke, he'd thrashed, desperate to find her, only to be restrained by Sophia's father. Later, he'd swallowed a bottle of sleeping pills, slit his wrists, thrown himself into the river. 3 suicide attempts, 3 times he was saved. Everyone said Commander Bell and Mr. Cole were so deeply in love. And they were. So in love that it took him 3 months after her death to find out the horrifying truth. It wasn't Sophia who had died at all. The night he was revived from his 3rd attempt, Ethan, pale and gaunt, went to his wife's family home. He'd hoped to ask her father for some of Sophia's old belongings, anything to soothe the gnawing ache in his soul. But as he approached, he heard low voices from an inner room. "Sophia, how much longer are you going to keep this up? Ethan's tried to kill himself 3 times for you." His fingers dug into his palms, drawing blood. Sophia? Why was her father calling Chloe by Sophia's name? "Dad, just a little longer." The voice was undeniably Chloe's, yet the tone, the gentle cadence, was eerily like Sophia's. "Before Chloe died, she asked me to take care of Mark. He's never known hardship. He wouldn't survive the news of her death. I had to take Chloe's place, give Mark a child. With a child to live for, he can go on." Ethan's blood ran cold. He could barely process what he was hearing. So, it was Chloe who had died, not Sophia. His wife was alive and posing as her dead sister, sleeping in the room next to his, every night, with Mark Jensen. "But what about Ethan?" her father pressed, his voice urgent. "You're in Mark's room every night. Haven't you thought about Ethan's feelings? He's stronger than Mark." The words were a knife to Ethan's heart. He stumbled back, knocking over a broom, leaning against the wall. The house fell silent. He turned and fled, as if from a tidal wave. Running, a sharp pain shot through his hand. He uncurled his fist. The service medal, clutched too tightly, had sliced his palm open. Blood dripped onto the pavement. For 3 months, he'd slept with this medal, waking from tear-soaked nightmares countless times. Now, it was a grotesque joke. His wife wasn't dead. She'd merely chosen to let him believe she was, all to console her brother-in-law. 5 years ago, he and Sophia had met at the annual Base Gala and Talent Showcase. She was the reserved, striking Commander Bell. He was the lead vocalist for the base's entertainment division band. She had many admirers, as did he. But that night, she'd stood in the audience, her gaze fixed on him as he sang a soulful rendition of a classic American anthem. Then, she'd strode onto the stage and, in front of everyone, draped her heavy service coat over his shoulders. "Ethan Cole," she'd said, her voice low. "It's cold out. Don't catch a chill." Wrapped in her coat, he'd felt the warmth of her affection, a palpable heat. Soon after, she began to pursue him. Before every deployment, she'd find a reason to swing by the band's rehearsal hall to see him. The day he'd finally agreed to date her, she'd leaped into his arms, exclaiming, "Ethan, I, Sophia Bell, am yours for life." After they married, everyone said Commander Bell adored her husband, cherished him to the core. He, too, had believed she loved him as much as life itself. But now, to take care of her brother-in-law, she was impersonating her dead sister, sharing Mark's bed, even planning to get pregnant with Mark's child. And he, like a fool, had wept for her, tried to die for her, suffered unimaginable pain for her. Had she ever once considered that he, too, could feel pain? He arrived home in a daze. Mrs. Gable, the neighborhood's most active and sometimes pushy matchmaker, was there again. "Ethan, honey, Captain Stone is being reassigned to that naval base on Port Gecko in 2 weeks. This is the 7th time she's asked me to talk to you. She said, if you still say no, she's not planning on ever coming back stateside." Vera Stone, Sophia's former squad mate. From the day he was officially declared a widower, Vera had, through Mrs. Gable, repeatedly made her interest known. He'd refused the first 6 times. He thought he could only ever love Sophia. But now, he looked up, his voice surprisingly calm. "All right, I'll marry her." Mrs. Gable blinked. Are you serious?" "I am." He managed a faint smile. "Please tell Vera Stone that in 2 weeks, I'll marry her. I'll go to Port Gecko with her." The curtain over the doorway was suddenly yanked aside. Sophia stood there, her face a thundercloud. "Ethan, who are you marrying?" she demanded, though her eyes were fixed on Mrs. Gable. Ethan looked at her, the woman he thought was Chloe, and a bitter laugh almost escaped him. "Chloe," he said softly, "this is my business." Her words were for the matchmaker, but she grabbed Ethan's wrist, her grip painfully tight. My brother-in-law has me to take care of him. He doesn't need to marry anyone else. Besides, he loves Sophia so much, he'd never agree. Mrs. Gable, don't come back again, or you'll force me to be inhospitable. Mrs. Gable looked bewildered, but Ethan just agreed. Before she could finish, Ethan quickly pulled her arm. Mrs. Gable, didn't you say you were heading to the BX? You'd better hurry before it closes. Distracted Mrs. Gable nodded and quickly left. Once she was gone, Sophia let out a breath, stepping closer to Ethan. Her voice was hoarse. Ethan, even though Sophia's gone, don't worry, I'll take care of you. If any more matchmakers show up, just send them packing. Ethan found the situation utterly ridiculous. She was hiding from him, sleeping in her brother-in-law's bed every night, yet she was afraid he'd run off and marry someone else? What kind of twisted logic was that? But he didn't expose her. He just nodded. In 2 weeks, he'd be remarried and gone from this place forever. She wouldn't be able to control him then. That night, as Ethan was packing, the unmistakable creak of a bed frame came from the adjoining wall. Before, he'd have assumed it was just a loving couple. Now, every sigh, every muffled sound was like a dull knife twisting in his gut. That was Sophia's moan, the sound she used to make only in his ear when she was lost in passion. Ah! A sharp cry pierced the night. Ethan rushed out to see Mark Jensen helping Sophia out of their house. In the moonlight, a shocking stain of red was spreading on her pale pajamas. The family housing complex instantly buzzed. Mrs. Peterson, their next-door neighbor, poked her head out. My, what's happened here? Someone whispered. Heard they were, a bit too enthusiastic, and she started bleeding. TSK, he always looks so serious, but I guess he really dotes on his wife. Ethan stood in the small crowd, a chill seeping into his bones. He turned to leave, but Mrs. Peterson grabbed his arm. Ethan, you're her brother-in-law. You have to go with them to the hospital. Fearing gossip, he had no choice but to throw on a jacket and head to the base hospital. The sharp scent of antiseptic in the corridor made Ethan's eyes sting. Mark paced anxiously. He looked up, startled to see Ethan. What are you doing here? Ethan forced a twitch of his lips. As her brother-in-law, I thought I should check in. The operating room door swung open, and a doctor emerged. Don't worry, sir. Your wife is fine. She's pregnant. You'll just need to be more gentle from now on. Ethan stood in the hospital corridor, a roaring in his ears. The doctor's words, she's pregnant, hit him like a lead pipe. He instinctively looked towards Sophia on the gurney. He saw her initial shock melt into an expression of unadulterated joy as she whispered, thank God. Everything's going to get back on track. He knew exactly what she meant. She was pregnant. She could finally shed the identity of Chloe Bell and come back to him, but he no longer needed her. However, the patient is somewhat anemic. She'll need a blood transfusion, the doctor continued, interrupting Ethan's thoughts. Mark Jensen immediately rolled up his sleeve, but the doctor stopped him. Your blood type doesn't match. We need type B. Ethan was type B. Mark's gaze shifted to Ethan. After a moment's hesitation, he walked over. Ethan, my wife is pregnant. This baby, we've wanted it for so long. He paused. Would you donate blood for her? When the baby's born, my wife and I will make it up to you. Make it up to him? Ethan scoffed internally. Mark certainly owed him a great deal. I can donate the blood. No need for compensation, he said calmly, turning to follow the nurse. As the needle pierced his vein, he watched his own crimson blood flow into the collection bag. He suddenly remembered the year they were newlyweds. He'd had a raging fever, and Sophia hadn't slept for nights, tending to him. It had been a needle like this one then, too, when they'd drawn his blood for tests. She'd gripped his hand tightly, saying, Don't be scared, honey, I'm right here. Now his blood was going to flow into her body to nourish her child with another man. Over the next few days, Ethan rested at home. Through his window, he witnessed Mark and Sophia's idyllic domesticity. Mark bustled between home and the hospital, carrying a thermos. One day, it was homemade chicken noodle soup, the next, specially prepared omelets with spinach for iron. The day Sophia was discharged, the entire housing complex smelled faintly sweet, like the caramel she loved. Sophia, cradling a large jar of celebratory chocolates, went door to door, a rare, unrestrained smile lighting her usually composed features. I'm pregnant. Have a chocolate to celebrate. Congratulations, congratulations. You must be so thrilled to finally be expecting. She laughed, her eyes crinkling with the joy of impending motherhood. Finally, she approached Ethan's door, her hand hesitating slightly as she offered him the jar. Ethan, congratulations, Chloe. He took a chocolate, his smile perfectly polite. I wish you three a lifetime of happiness. Sophia's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. His blessing was too proper, so polite it made her uneasy. Ever since Sophia Bell's sacrifice, Ethan had been a wreck, constantly talking about suicide. When had he ever been this calm? Before she could dwell on it, Mark walked over, slipping an arm around her waist. Chloe, didn't we say we'd treat Ethan to dinner? To thank Ethan for the blood donation, Mark had insisted on taking him out. Ethan had refused repeatedly, but was eventually bundled into their car. At Rosie's Diner, a local spot popular with military families, the waitress greeted them warmly. Table for 3? Her eyes flicked between Sophia and Mark, then she beamed. You two make such a handsome couple. Then, looking at Ethan, she added, and this must be your younger brother? He's so good-looking. Sophia froze, about to speak, but Ethan's calm voice cut in. Yes, I'm her brother. The words were like a dagger to her heart. But, glancing down at her own, slightly swelling abdomen, she didn't correct him. When it was time to order, Sophia reeled off a list of items with practiced ease. For him, the chili burger, no onions, extra crispy fries, and a diet soda. And make sure the fries are really crispy. All of Mark's preferences. It wasn't until the waitress asked, and what would your brother like, that she seemed to remember Ethan, turning to him. I'm good with anything, he said, looking down at his cup of tea, the steam blurring his expression. After the food arrived, Ethan mechanically picked at his rice. A sudden tightness seized his throat. He realized with a jolt that the slice of pecan pie the waitress had brought on the house for the expectant mother's brother was loaded with pecans. He was deathly allergic to pecans. Sophia used to remember every single one of his allergies. She'd even cautioned the mess hall staff about cross-contamination. Now, she hadn't even blinked when the pie arrived. Ethan, Mark noticed his pale face. What's wrong? Sophia finally looked up. Seeing his flushed cheeks, she shot to her feet. Did you eat the pecans? His breathing grew labored. Black spots danced before his eyes. In a daze, he saw Sophia rushing towards him, only to be stopped midway by Mark's sudden groan. My head is killing me. Time seemed to freeze. He watched Sophia, caught between him and Mark, her gaze torn. Finally, she chose Mark. As she helped him up, she hurriedly told the waitress, Please, get my brother to the hospital. Sir? Sir? The waitress's panicked calls grew distant as Ethan's vision blurred and he blacked out. The sting of antiseptic assaulted his nostrils. Ethan opened his eyes to see a nurse changing his foredrip. Oh, you're awake. The nurse sounded relieved. Good thing the diner staff got you here quickly. Anaphylactic shock can be fatal. Ethan tried to speak, but his throat was raw. The image of Sophia unhesitatingly leaving with Mark was seared into his mind. He closed his eyes, but tears escaped, tracing a path down his temples into his hair. During his 3-day hospital stay, Ethan lay alone. The allergic reaction had left him covered in an itchy rash, his throat so swollen he could barely swallow water. At his lowest, he overheard nurses whispering outside his door. The guy in 308, just a migraine from a draft, and his wife is frantic. Not like the patient in 302 here. Severe allergic reaction, and his wife hasn't even visited. It's like she's dead to him. Ethan buried his face in the pillow. Yes, his wife was long dead. Died on that mission. Died 3 months ago, died. The moment she chose to become someone else's wife. The day he was discharged, the sunlight was brilliant. As Ethan reached the hospital entrance, he saw a familiar olive drab Jeep. The next second, Mark Jensen walked out of the hospital doors. The Jeep's door flew open, and Sophia rushed out, carefully supporting Mark. Slowly, the doctor said you need a rest. Her voice was so gentle it could melt ice, identical to how she used to soothe him. Ethan stood frozen, watching the Jeep speed away, its exhaust fumes washing over his pale face. She hadn't even spared him a glance. The evening breeze carried a chill. Ethan pushed open his front door and saw, from a distance, a slender figure standing on his porch. Sophia held several bags filled with protein bars, organic fruit baskets, and containers of homemade soup. More bags were at her feet, containing electrolyte drinks and other supplements. Ethan, she hurried towards him. Your allergy. Are you feeling better? How ironic. During the day, she'd ignored him completely. Now, when no one was around, she was playing the concerned sister-in-law. Thank you for asking, Chloe. I'm much better. He moved to bypass her and open his door. Sophia grabbed his wrist. Take these. They'll help you recover. I don't need, Chloe. Something's happened. Mark Jensen burst into the yard, tears streaming down his face. I'm being investigated for running that kickback scheme with the veteran housing allowances. I just want to make some extra money. Buy more things for our baby. Now the MPs are coming to arrest me. A vein throbbed in Sophia's temple. My entire monthly salary goes to you, and you still had to pull something like this? Mark tugged at her sleeve, stamping his foot. What do we do now? You're pregnant. I can't go to jail. The yard gate was suddenly kicked open. 3 stern-faced individuals in civilian clothes with official-looking badges strode in. Mark Jensen, we have reports that you've been defrauding the government through a veteran housing allowance scam. Please come with us. The air crackled with tension. Sophia remained silent for a long moment, then spoke, her voice flat. It wasn't him. All eyes focused on her. After a few seconds of charged silence, she enunciated each word clearly. I know about this. Mark didn't do it. It was Ethan Cole. The world seemed to stop. What did you say? Ethan's voice trembled. Say that again. Who was it? She avoided his gaze, her eyes darting around. It was Ethan Cole. Ethan trembled, about to protest, but the investigators had already seized his arms. We have a witness identifying you. Please cooperate with our investigation. As he was pushed towards their unmarked car, Ethan stared hard at Sophia. She stood in front of Mark Jensen, her military bearing impeccable. Yet she was no longer the woman he remembered, the one who would have shielded him with her life during an earthquake. In the small, sterile interrogation room, Ethan's denials fell on deaf ears. Commander Bell herself identified you. You think she'd lie? The lead investigator slammed a pen on the table in front of him. Just confess. After 3 days without food or water, Ethan was processed and transferred, sentenced to hard labor at the Fort Leavenworth Disciplinary Barracks, then reassigned to a remote mining detail as part of his sentence. The mine shaft was dark, cold, and damp. He carried a heavy basket of, or each step agony. Suddenly, a deafening roar echoed through the tunnel. Cave in. Run. Before Ethan could react, collapsing rock and debris buried the lower half of his body. Through the searing pain, he heard someone screaming his name, a desperate, heart-wrenching sound. Ethan, hold on. Was it a hallucination? The woman who had abandoned him, now frantically clawing at the rocks with her bare hands, her fingers bloody. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. When Sophia finally pulled him free, her voice was a ragged whisper, repeating his name over and over. My sister is dead now. Only my brother-in-law is left. He can't endure this kind of suffering. I had to blame you, Ethan. I had no choice. It hurt me more than it hurt you. When my baby is born, I'll bring you home. Wake up. Please wake up. I can't live without you. Ethan wanted to laugh. She was always like this, a lash of the whip, then a piece of candy. His last sensation before unconsciousness was Sophia's hot tears falling on his face. When he woke again, the hospital room was quiet. Sophia was slumped beside his bed, asleep. The moment Ethan stirred, she jerked awake. Ethan! She threw her arms around him, her eyes red, and desperately pressed her lips to his. Thank God, you're awake, thank God. Stop it. Ethan shoved her away with all his strength. What the hell do you think you're doing? Sophia released him abruptly, stumbling back as if burned. I'm sorry, Her eyes were dark, her voice hoarse. Mark's been feeling unwell and was admitted. I must have gone to the wrong room, mistaken you for him. She turned and fled, her retreat so hasty it looked like an escape. Ethan wiped the lingering warmth from his lips, a bitter irony twisting inside him. She couldn't even lie convincingly. It was broad daylight. How could she mistake the room, let alone the person? After a few more days in the hospital, Ethan arranged his discharge. It happened to be the base's annual open house. As he walked into the family housing area, a group of enthusiastic military spouses surrounded him. Ethan, dear, Sophia's been gone a while now. You're too young to be alone like this. It's time to move on. I know the perfect girl for you. Exactly. Colonel Davis's youngest daughter just graduated West Point, a real knockout. Ethan opened his mouth, about to mention he'd already accepted Vera Stone's proposal, but he was gently pushed towards a woman in a smart civilian suit. Look here, this is Ms. Walker. She works at the Research Institute, owns her own condo, drives a new SUV, and pulls in $95,000 a year. Ms. Walker adjusted her glasses, about to speak, when a dark blur shot past. A fist connected, and Ms. Walker went down. Everyone present froze. Ethan looked up into a pair of blazing, crimson eyes. Sophia stood there, 3 buttons of her uniform shirt undone, her chest heaving. Ladies, I appreciate the sentiment, she said, each word like a chip of ice. My brother-in-law is under my care. I won't trouble you. She grabbed Ethan's hand and stalked off, dragging him behind her. Only when they were a good distance away did Ethan wrench his hand free. Chloe Bell. He deliberately emphasized the name. The only one meddling here is you. Sophia's pupils constricted. Truth be told, he continued, smoothing his wrinkled sleeve, you and I are nothing to each other. Who I see, who I marry, that's my business. My freedom. He turned to leave, but heard a sickening thud behind him. Sophia had slammed her fist into a tree trunk. Blood trickled down between her knuckles. Ethan walked away without a backward glance. Late that night, a rustling sound woke Ethan. Before he could turn on the light, a hot body pressed down on him. The overpowering smell of alcohol mixed with a familiar pine scent filled the air as Sophia's lips crashed onto his. MMPH. She was clearly very drunk, her kiss fierce and urgent. Ethan struggled to push her off, but a drunken woman possessed surprising strength. Don't go. Sophia's voice was a ragged rasp, hot tears splashing onto his face. Don't go on dates with anyone else. Please. Ethan trembled, whether from anger or humiliation, he couldn't tell. Sophia Bell, you are Mark Jensen's wife. I'm not, she mumbled, her forehead pressed painfully against his. Just wait soon. Get off. Ethan snapped his knee up. Sophia grunted and tumbled off the bed. The noise alerted Mark next door. He pushed open Ethan's door. What's going on? The lights flicked on. Ethan turned his head, covering his bitten, bleeding lip with his left hand. Chloe got drunk and came to the wrong room. You should take her back, Mark. Mark's gaze fixed on Ethan's bleeding lip, his own fingernails digging deep into his palms. But he said nothing, his expression unreadable as he helped Sophia to her feet. Chloe, let's go back to our room. Sophia, stumbling, was led away, but at the doorway, she glanced back at Ethan. Her eyes held the desperate look of a cornered animal. Ethan closed his door and slowly slid to the floor. The cut on his lip throbbed, but the ache in his chest, in that place already riddled with 1,000 wounds, was far worse. The next day, just as dawn was breaking, the sound of a car engine starting echoed through the housing area. Ethan opened his eyes, listening as Sophia's car drove away. He'd just begun to breathe a sigh of relief when his door was violently kicked open. Crack! A stinging slap landed hard across his face. Mark Jensen stood by his bed, eyes filled with venom. You pathetic bastard. Your own wife dies, so you try to seduce your sister-in-law. What are you talking about? Ethan clutched his burning cheek, then understanding dawned. Last night, how ludicrous. Sophia was, by law and before God, his wife. Yet now, any intimacy between them was grounds for another man to accuse him of adultery. You're mistaken. Last night, it was her. Shut up. Mark suddenly swept the candlestick from the nightstand. Don't think your pretty face can charm another man's wife. Today, I'll show you who really matters to her. Flames shot up the curtains, spreading instantly. Are you insane? Ethan leaped out of bed, intending to flee, but Mark grabbed his wrist in a death grip. What's the hurry? Mark sneered. You think I'm going to die with you? He leaned close to Ethan's ear, his voice chillingly low. I called Sophia before I came over. Let's see who she saves first, shall we? Thick smoke choked Ethan, bringing tears to his eyes. He struggled desperately, then heard rushed footsteps outside. Mark! Ethan! The moment Sophia burst into the inferno, Ethan had a fleeting memory of their wedding night. She'd held him close, whispering, Ethan, remember this. No matter what, you will always be my first choice. But reality was cruel. She didn't even glance his way, heading straight for Mark and pulling him towards the exit. Sophia! Ethan reached out, but a collapsing ceiling beam blocked his path. The intense heat seared his skin. As he fell, he seemed to see Sophia again, years ago, backstage at the Base Theater, smiling as she pressed a caramel into his hand. Ethan? Ethan! Through the acrid smell of antiseptic, Ethan struggled to open his eyes. Sophia sat by his bed, a dark stubble shadowing her chin, heavy bags under her eyes. You've just had skin grafts. Don't move. She reached out to help him, but he flinched away. Skin grafts? Ethan's voice was a hoarse whisper, disbelieving. Sophia's brow furrowed. You started that fire and nearly killed Mark. You're lucky it's just a few skin grafts. What's with all the drama? Ethan suddenly laughed, a laugh that brought tears to his eyes. He said I started the fire? He said that, and you just believed him. Who else would I believe? Sophia rubbed her temples tiredly. I'm his wife. The word wife stabbed into his heart like a shard of glass. Ethan ripped the 4 needle from the back of his hand. Then what are you doing here? Get out. The 4 bottle shattered on the floor. Sophia seized his bleeding hand. Ethan, calm down. I know you feel wronged, but just wait another 10 months until the baby is born. Get out. Ethan grabbed a pillow and hurled it at her. I never want to see you again. The pillow struck her shoulder, light and ineffective. Sophia stood frozen for a moment, her expression hardening, then turned and left. After the door clicked shut, Ethan noticed a box of caramels on the nightstand. His favorite kind. He snatched the box and threw it violently against the wall. Caramels scattered across the floor, like the shattered pieces of his heart. The day Ethan was discharged, the bright sunlight made his eyes ache. As he reached the entrance of the family housing area, he saw Mrs. Gable waving energetically at him. "Ethan, finally! I've been waiting for you." "Mrs. Gable." Ethan smoothed the hair at his temples. The burns on his right arm still throbbed dully. "Everything's arranged with Captain Stone. The boat leaves first thing tomorrow morning." Mrs. Gable lowered her voice, pulling a ferry ticket from her purse. She specifically said not to bring too much luggage. Everything's provided for on Port Gecko. Ethan quickly took a red envelope filled with cash from his pocket and pressed it into her hand. "Thank you for all your trouble, Mrs. Gable." "Oh, honey, Captain Stone already paid me for my matchmaking services. This is extra." Ethan gently pushed the envelope into her hand, a small smile playing on his lips. "To celebrate my new life." Mrs. Gable paused. Then her face broke into a wide grin. "You're right. It is a cause for celebration. When a wife dies, you forget her and look forward." Yes, in everyone's eyes, Sophia Bell was long dead. Died on that mission. Died with that bloodstained medal. Only he knew she was very much alive, living in another man's arms. Just as he was about to speak, the yard gate was kicked open with a bang. Sophia stood in the doorway, her face grim, her uniform soaked with sweat, clearly having rushed back. "I told you. No more setting Ethan up with anyone." She snatched the red envelope from Mrs. Gable's hand. "I will take care of him, and he will not agree to remarry." Mrs. Gable flinched. "But he already." "Mrs. Gable, perhaps you should head home now," Ethan interrupted softly, giving her a pointed look. Mrs. Gable scurried away, nearly colliding with Mark Jensen, who was just entering the yard. Mark looked up, saw Sophia standing protectively in front of Ethan, and his eyes instantly turned venomous. Late that night, as Ethan was packing his few remaining belongings, his door was shoved open. Mark sneered. "Haven't learned your lesson from last time? Still trying to seduce Chloe?" Ethan continued folding his clothes without looking up. "I'm leaving tomorrow." "You." Before he could finish, Mark suddenly cried out, "Ah!" and collapsed to the floor, clutching his leg and howling in pain. Almost simultaneously, Sophia burst in from outside. "Mark!" She didn't even glance at Ethan, immediately rushing to Mark's side and helping him towards the door. Ethan stood rooted to the spot, hearing Mark's cries echo down the hallway. "He pushed me. Chloe, my leg. Will I ever be able to dance again?" Such clumsy acting. Ethan wanted to laugh, but tasted the salty sting of tears on his lips. As dawn broke, Ethan, suitcase in hand, had just reached the yard gate when he ran into a disheveled Sophia, clearly having just returned. Dark circles ringed her eyes, which were heavily bloodshot. "Why do you keep trying to hurt Mark?" she demanded, grabbing his wrist. "I was with him all night. His leg is crucial for his dancing. How will he live now because of you?" Ethan pulled his hand free and silently walked towards the gate. She finally noticed his suitcase. "How did you know I was going to ask you to leave? You even packed your bags." Ethan finally stopped. "Asked me to leave?" Her usually composed face was etched with fatigue, but her voice was still cold. "Yes. My pregnancy has been a bit unstable lately. My husband and I don't want to see you for a while. You should go stay at your parents' place for a bit." She tried to take his suitcase. "I'll take you to the station." "No need." Ethan pulled the suitcase back. "I can go by myself." Sophia, however, stubbornly followed him, as if afraid he wouldn't actually leave, escorting him all the way to the bus station. "You just stay with your parents for a while. After my baby is born, I'll come get you. I won't go in with you. You can buy your own ticket. Mark's waiting for me at the hospital." After a few more instructions, she turned and hurried away. Ethan stood before the ticket window, then let out a soft laugh. "Sophia Bell, go take care of your Mark Jensen for the rest of your life." After watching the olive-drab Jeep disappear into the morning mist, Ethan slowly turned and walked in the opposite direction. There, he would find a shuttle bus to the harbor, Vera Stone waiting for him, and a brand new life. In the morning light, he cast one last look back towards the military base. "Sophia Bell, this time we're truly done. We'll never meet again." At the harbor, after Ethan dragged his luggage off the shuttle bus, he immediately spotted a woman in a gray coat waving excitedly at him. "Ethan!" Vera Stone's normally calm eyes lit up the moment she saw the man she had secretly admired for so long. Forgetting her own bags, she rushed towards him, reaching for his suitcase. "Let me help you with that." Ethan wasn't one for pretense. Besides, he and Vera were going to be husband and wife, sharing a life together. He needed to get used to her. So, he handed over the suitcase, a slight smile touching his lips. Thanks. The deep timbre of his voice sent a flush creeping up Vera's ears, as red as ripe tomatoes. She scratched her head, embarrassed, and smiled shyly. Don't mention it. We're going to be family soon, after all. Family? Ethan's steps faltered. He instinctively looked at Vera beside him. This was the first time in years he had truly taken a good look at the woman by his side. For Mrs. Gable's enthusiastic descriptions and gossip from old high school classmates, one thing was clear. Vera Stone was deeply in love with him. So in love that she had rejected countless suitors her parents had introduced over the years. So in love that she had politely turned down many bold men who pursued her passionately. Even during the years of his widowhood, she had ignored all the wagging tongues, waiting steadfastly for him, waiting for his nod. Even now, as he looked at her, she was sneaking glances at him from the corner of her eye. The moment their gazes met, she would quickly look away, feigning nonchalance, only the blush on her cheeks betraying her true feelings. This amusing sight drew a chuckle from him. But then, as if remembering something important, Ethan spoke her name, his expression serious. Vera, there's something I need to tell you. Since he had firmly decided to give up on Sophia, to forget the past and sever all ties with the people and events of before, and to build a good life with the woman before him, he needed to offer her honesty, to clarify things to avoid future misunderstandings. Seeing his seriousness, Vera mirrored his expression, her earlier excitement subdued. Go on. Ethan took a deep breath. You probably know about my past, right? How could Vera not know? From the moment she first fell for Ethan, she had silently followed his life. That was why, the instant she heard of his wife's passing, she had immediately sent Mrs. Gable to propose, letting the entire housing complex know that he was hers and could only be hers. So, Vera nodded quickly. Ethan smiled faintly. But what I need to tell you is, my wife didn't die. Boom. The words hit Vera like a physical blow. Her mind went blank. The bag she was holding slipped from her grasp, unnoticed. A storm raged within her. What did he mean his wife was still alive? Did this mean her years of longing were about to be shattered again? She hadn't even had a chance to properly confess the depth of her love, accumulated over so many years. Was she going to lose him again? Just as Vera's thoughts spiraled into chaos, a warm, strong hand reached out and grasped hers. A reassuring voice sounded by her ear. But don't worry, I won't go back to her. Our marriage effectively ended the moment she died. Besides, she's Mark Jensen's wife now. What? The successive bombshells left Vera reeling, unable to recover from the shock. So, Ethan told her everything. Sophia impersonating her sister, sleeping with her brother-in-law, planning to have his child, and then return to Ethan. Even if she comes looking for me one day, wanting me to go with her, you don't have to worry, Ethan concluded. She has no proof whatsoever that she's Sophia Bell. In a way, Ethan had Sophia herself to thank for cutting off her own escape route. When he first heard the devastating news of Sophia's death, he'd been on the verge of a complete breakdown, often mistaking Chloe, who was then his sister-in-law, for his deceased wife. Perhaps to force him to accept reality, or for some other reason, Sophia, as Chloe, had, in front of the entire base housing community, taken a solemn oath that she would forever be Mark Jensen's wife and Mark Jensen's alone. Furthermore, she had burned every piece of evidence that could prove her true identity as Sophia Bell, claiming it was a ritual to help Ethan fully recognize that his wife was truly and utterly gone. So now, no person, no document, could prove she was Sophia Bell. If she dared to claim it, she'd either be dismissed as delusional and committed to a psychiatric hospital, or, if somehow proven, she'd be prosecuted for fraud and deception by the military authorities. Either path was a dead end. And for Ethan, this completely eliminated any future complications. Hearing this, the heart that had leaped into Vera's throat finally settled back in her chest. In her memory, Sophia Bell was a decisive, meticulous woman. She never imagined Sophia would one day, for the sake of so-called love, shoot herself in the foot so spectacularly. But it was for the best. Now, Sophia could never take Ethan away from her. From this moment on, Ethan Cole would be hers, and hers alone. At this thought, the smile she had suppressed returned, even brighter than before. The hand Ethan held, she now gripped back tightly. Vera, Ethan said, his voice earnest, I've decided to marry you and build a life with you. That means I'm leaving the past behind. I won't look back for anyone. But I also expect you not to betray my trust. You know me. If you do that, I'll leave you forever in Yule." Before Ethan could finish, Vera threw her arms around him. The clean scent of her soap and sunshine enveloped him, and an inexplicable sense of peace settled over him. "Ethan," she murmured against his chest, her voice calm, yet incredibly firm, "I've loved you for 10 whole years. I've waited for you for so long. I know better than anyone how hard won your yes was, and I understand, more than anyone, how much courage it took for you to cut ties with your past and step into a new relationship. All I can do is love you with everything I have, cherish you, warm you, not hurt you. I know," she continued softly, "you might not fully believe this now. After all, for you, this is just the beginning of accepting me, of getting to know me. Your heart won't be entirely mine right away, but we have a lifetime ahead of us. I will prove to you how much I love you." Her words, spoken so quietly yet with such conviction, were like a gentle hand cupping Ethan's cold, dead heart, slowly warming it, coaxing tender green shoots from barren land. An unexpected warmth pricked Ethan's eyes. He said nothing, but his arms came up, slowly stroking Vera's back, then tightening his embrace. Just then, the ferry docked at the port, let out a long blast of its horn, urging the remaining passengers ashore to board. Vera gently pulled away, then, picking up their luggage with one hand and taking Ethan's with the other, she smiled at him. "Let's go, together with her, to a new life." "Okay." Ethan smiled back. They joined the stream of passengers boarding the vessel. Another blast from the horn, and a plume of dark smoke billowed from the ferry's funnel, like an invisible giant hand waving goodbye to the harbor. Passengers crowded the railings, waving tearful farewells to loved ones on shore. Only Ethan and Vera stood close together, silently watching the harbor recede until it was no longer visible. Back at the hospital in Oakbridge City, after Sophia had seen Ethan off at the station, she'd rushed back to Mark's side. Ever since Mark had been pushed by Ethan, his mood had been volatile, and he'd become increasingly demanding, unable to bear her absence for even a moment. If he didn't see her, he'd create a terrible scene. Thinking of this, she quickened her pace. Sure enough, Mark, having woken up alone in his hospital room, was already in tears. Chloe, where are you?" When no one answered, a rising panic gripped him, and even his injured leg seemed to throb more painfully. Ignoring it, he dragged his weakened body out of bed, intending to find her. Just then, Sophia, the object of his anxious thoughts, strode through the door. Mark, seeing him unsteadily trying to get out of bed, on the verge of falling, Sophia's heart lurched. She lunged forward. Careful, enveloped in a familiar embrace, all of Mark's suppressed fear and anxiety poured out. His grip on Sophia's clothes tightened, and he slowly looked up at her, tears splashing onto the floor. I thought you'd abandoned me. These past few days, Sophia's unusual behavior towards Ethan and Ethan's subtle provocations had filled Mark with a profound sense of crisis. Having witnessed his mother's downfall and family power struggles and endured over a decade of hardship, he knew all too well what this feeling of crisis signified. Fear consumed him. He was terrified Sophia would abandon him, just as his father had abandoned his mother. For years, Sophia, or who he thought was Sophia, had been exceptionally good to him, rescuing him from poverty and providing a life of comfort he'd never dared to imagine. After her return from a mission, as Chloe, she had loved him deeply, spending every night by his side. Her love had become his everything. He couldn't fathom life without her. Thus, he'd resorted to various means to prevent the outcome he dreaded most. But when he'd woken from his nap on the hospital bed to find her gone, only her aide informing him she'd gone home to take Ethan home, Mark had waited for what felt like an eternity. She hadn't returned, and he'd been consumed by the fear that something had happened between her and Ethan on the way. He hadn't dared to imagine what he and their unborn child would do if his fears were realized. Thankfully, she had returned in time. Looking at Mark in this state, nestled in her arms, any words Sophia had intended to say dissolved into a sigh. She raised a hand, gently wiping his tears with her fingertips. Only after she had calmed him down did Sophia explain her delay. She had initially planned to take Ethan directly to his parents' house. However, worried about Mark, she had instead dropped Ethan off near the train station and rushed back to the hospital. Unfortunately, her car had broken down halfway. Anxious about Mark, she'd left the car with her aide and run the rest of the way. It was then that Mark noticed her sweat-beaded forehead and perspiration-soaked clothes. He was both touched and concerned, quickly taking a handkerchief to wipe her face. Then, as if remembering something, he bit his lip. But, Chloe, leaving Ethan alone at the station like that, wasn't that a bit unwise? I've heard the station area isn't too safe lately. What if something happened to him? Though Mark voiced concern, he secretly hoped Ethan would indeed run into trouble. If Ethan met with some misfortune, he could no longer return to tempt his wife. Hearing this, Sophia's body stiffened slightly. She then shook her head, comforting Mark. Don't worry, he'll be fine. He's a grown man, perfectly capable of looking after himself. Besides, Sophia thought, Ethan managed perfectly well without me all these years, didn't he? What could possibly happen on a simple trip home? Moreover, she had already called Ethan's parents and asked them to meet him at the station. That evening, as usual, Sophia lay beside Mark, snuggling into his embrace, gently stroking her belly. The conversation naturally turned to the baby. Somehow, Mark grew curious about the child's future appearance. Chloe, who do you think the baby will look more like? Sophia's hand, caressing her stomach, paused for a fraction of a second before she replied, It doesn't matter who the baby resembles, as long as you like them. Though she said this, Ethan's image involuntarily surfaced in her mind. She couldn't help but wonder, if she and Ethan were to have a child, what would they be like? If it were a boy, she hoped he would take after Ethan, so she could shower them both with affection. If it were a girl, she hoped she would resemble Sophia herself, giving her two precious treasures. The thought of children sweetly clinging to them brought a tender expression to Sophia's usually cool face, an unconscious smile playing on her lips. Seeing her so gentle, a warmth spread through Mark. He held her tighter, his hands slowly exploring beneath her nightgown. Chloe! Sophia looked down and saw Mark gazing at her, his every movement charged with an unspoken invitation that made her stomach clench. But she knew, deep down, that her mission, being declared pregnant as Chloe, was complete. Staying by his side, now, was merely to ensure the safe delivery of this child. She was ready to return to her life with Ethan and had no intention of engaging in further intimacy with Mark. With this resolve, she took a deep breath, trying to suppress the rising heat in her body, and attempted to push Mark's hands away. But Mark, his desire ignited, was not easily dissuaded. He assumed she was merely being shy and leaned in to kiss her. Chloe, we're husband and wife. Your pregnancy is stable now. The doctor said it's okay. Thump! The words husband and wife struck Sophia's heart like a sledgehammer, jolting her back to awareness. Yes, she was so focused on returning to her small home with Ethan that she had forgotten her current identity. She was still Chloe Bell, Mark Jensen's wife, and she still had to fulfill her duties as such. At this realization, her eyes darkened. She leaned down and kissed Mark. They lay face to face, cocooned in their blankets. She cradled his face with one hand, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps as she kissed him, sometimes lightly, sometimes with more force, her other hand carefully shielding the child in her womb. Mark's gaze was hazy as he felt her take the lead. Outside, the rain intensified, its relentless drumming audible even through the glass. Dark clouds roiled across the sky, punctuated by claps of thunder. A torrential downpour began, and a cool, damp mist seeped in through a partially open window. The hospital room's curtains were abruptly drawn shut by a large hand, leaving only a single wall lamp lit, its dim glow casting flickering shadows of two intertwined figures. Easy, honey. The next morning, the night-long rain finally ceased, leaving the air fresh with the scent of damp earth and new grass. Sunlight filtered through the leaves of the large trees, dappling the lounge chairs set out for shade and the swings hanging between branches. Flowers, large as teacups, lay scattered on the ground, beaten down by the rain. The streets, silent all night, gradually came alive with the ringing of bicycle bells, the calls of vendors, and a general hum of activity. This cacophony also woke Sophia, who had been sleeping soundly, curled up against Mark. She carefully disentangled herself, slipped out of bed, and bent to pick up the clothes scattered on the floor, tossing them into the laundry hamper. Then, opening the wardrobe, she selected fresh clothes, changed, and quietly left the room. She calculated the time. Ethan should have arrived home by now. Last night, because it was late and she worried he'd be exhausted from the long journey, she had resisted the urge to call his parents. After a night's rest, he should be fine. With this thought, she hurried to the public phone booth, picked up the receiver, and dialed the Cole's number. Ring, ring. The line rang unanswered, and Sophia's heart grew heavier with each passing second. Just as she was about to hang up and redial Mr. Cole's voice came through. Who is it? A flicker of joy lit Sophia's eyes. Dad, Mr. Cole, it's me, Chloe Bell. Oh, Mr. Cole replied flatly. Is there something you need? Hearing Mr. Cole's detached tone, Sophia was momentarily stunned. In her memory, Ethan's father had always been very pleased with her as a daughter-in-law and warm toward her family. Nothing like this coldness. Her grip on the receiver tightened. She sensed something was off about his attitude, but couldn't pinpoint it. On the other end, Mr. Cole, noticing Sophia's prolonged silence, was about to hang up. Sophia quickly snapped back to reality, asking if Ethan was home and if he could come to the phone. Mr. Cole's voice paused, then Mrs. Cole snatched the phone, her tone dripping with sarcasm. You meddle in everything. You've practically run Ethan's life. You don't know if he's home or not. Sophia froze, finally remembering why the Coles were displeased with her. After Ethan was declared a widower, his parents, heartbroken and worried he'd suffer alone, had wanted to bring him home and find him a good new wife. But Sophia, not actually dead, couldn't possibly watch her husband marry someone else. So, she had vehemently opposed it, even kneeling at the Coles' doorstep, swearing to high heaven that she, as Chloe, would take excellent care of Ethan. The Coles hadn't believed her and insisted on taking Ethan. In the end, Sophia had to involve her military superiors to settle the matter. From then on, the Coles had treated her and the Bell family with undisguised frostiness. Sophia knew she was in the wrong and planned to personally apologize to the Coles after her baby was born. After hanging up, Mrs. Cole looked at her husband, her expression grim. She still has the nerve to ask about Ethan. The Coles had known it was Sophia on the phone. They were already aware, through Mrs. Gable, that Ethan was marrying Vera Stone and moving to Port Gecko. They hadn't told Sophia or the Bells, considering it payback for Sophia's deception. An eye for an eye. Mr. Cole looked equally displeased, but patiently tried to soothe his wife. Don't worry, I won't let her off that easily. The day Sophia returned from her checkup was her mother's 60th birthday. Over the years, thanks to having one daughter hailed as a martyr and another a high-ranking commander, the Bell family's social standing had soared. On the day of the birthday banquet, their home was bustling with guests. Even Sophia's commanding officer made a special appearance to pay respects to Mrs. Bell. For a moment, Mrs. Bell was the picture of prestige. She surveyed the room, filled with Bell family members. To her left sat Sophia and her eldest son-in-law, Mark Jensen. To her right were her youngest daughter and son-in-law, who had traveled by train all the way from Washington, D.C. for the occasion. Only one seat at the main table remained conspicuously empty, the one meant for her second son-in-law, Ethan Cole. Mrs. Bell had hoped to use this opportunity for Sophia to bring Ethan back. However, Sophia had successfully dissuaded her, citing the long journey, Ethan's potential fatigue, and her concern that his presence might upset Mark. The Bell family had struggled to have children, and now that her daughter was finally pregnant, Mrs. Bell didn't want any further complications. It was just a pity the family couldn't all be together for the celebration. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Bell rose quickly. Let's go, it's time for the feast to begin. Sophia moved to support her mother, but Mrs. Bell waved her off. No need, I can manage. You're pregnant now. Let your husband look after you. Sophia's face flushed, and she glanced at Mark, who had come to offer his arm. Their eyes met briefly before he quickly looked away. Onlookers, seeing such an affectionate couple, offered praises. Only Mr. and Mrs. Bell, who knew the truth, wore somewhat strained smiles. The Bell family courtyard was festively decorated with lanterns and streamers. A large new smart TV Sophia had bought was playing an entertaining movie, while on a makeshift stage on the other side, a live jazz band played Mrs. Bell's favorite tunes. As fireworks blossomed in the darkening sky, the banquet reached its peak. Sophia and Mark, one on each side, escorted Mrs. Bell to the head table, upon which sat a magnificent tiered birthday cake Mark had specially ordered from a renowned bakery. Amidst a chorus of well wishes, Mrs. Bell was about to cut the cake when, in the next instant, the main gates were violently kicked open. The Coles, their faces grim, stormed in. Chloe Bell. The festive atmosphere instantly froze. Everyone stared at the intruding Cole family, utterly bewildered. Sophia, singled out, felt a chill. She didn't know why the Coles had traveled all this way to the Bell residence, and she didn't see Ethan among them. Confusion, apprehension, panic, and unease swirled around her. As she was about to step forward and ask, Mrs. Bell quickly forced a smile and went to take Mrs. Cole's arm. Oh, my dear in-laws, what a surprise. What brings you here? Mrs. Cole, unmoved by Mrs. Bell's attempt at friendliness, roughly pushed her away. Don't you dare call me in-law. Mom. Sophia rushed forward to steady her mother, her own face paling. What do you think you're doing? Mrs. Cole's anger flared even hotter. What am I doing? I should be asking what your family is doing. You swore in front of everyone you'd take excellent care of my son. How long has it been? Look how you've tormented him, huh? The guests, sensing a dramatic spectacle, decided to stay and crowded around. The Bell family members exchanged alarmed glances, quickly trying to usher the Coles inside. But Mr. Cole, now thoroughly incensed, ordered his relatives to block them. He roared, "Go inside. You feel shame now, do you? Where was your shame when you were hurting my son? Chloe Bell, I'm asking you. Was it you who made my son take the fall for your husband's fraudulent contracting scam? Was it you who let my son nearly die in that mine collapse? And when your husband set that fire to kill my son, was it you who stood by and did nothing, just watched him burn?" Mr. Cole's successive revelations of shocking secrets sent a wave of gasps through the crowd. Murmurs and whispers erupted everywhere. Mrs. Bell, who knew nothing of these truths, turned deathly pale, looking at her daughter in disbelief. "So, Chloe, are these things true?" "Of course they're true." Before Sophia could speak, Mrs. Cole, who was standing beside her, flung a handful of pre-printed documents into the air, copies of incriminating emails, official reports Sophia had allegedly manipulated, and photos of Ethan's injuries. The white papers scattered like snowflakes, landing in the hands of the stunned onlookers. As they read the contents, their expressions changed dramatically. My God, can this be real? The Bell family is that ruthless? Treating a widower like that. Ethan Cole was just a grieving husband, and they forced him to be a scapegoat for their precious son-in-law. They were trying to drive Ethan Cole to his grave. Listening to the rising tide of condemnation, Mrs. Cole's long-suppressed anguish finally overflowed. She collapsed to the ground with a thud, sobbing uncontrollably, her words laced with blood and tears. "You heartless people, my perfectly fine son, ruined by your family. If you couldn't take care of him, why didn't you let us bring him home in the first place? My poor, poor son." The scene descended into chaos. Accusations, weeping, and furious denunciations filled the air, each word like a slap across Mrs. Bell's face. She could bear it no longer. Clutching her chest, her eyes rolled back, and she fainted. "Mom! Mother!" Amidst the turmoil, a respected elder, a retired general who was a close friend of the Bell family, stepped forward to restore order. He asked the Coles what exactly they wanted. Mrs. Cole, helped to her feet by her nephew, wiped away her tears, and declared with grim determination, "I want my son, Ethan Cole, to completely and utterly sever all ties with the Bell family." Crack boom. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning accompanied by a deafening clap of thunder ripped through the sky, illuminating the varied expressions on the faces in the courtyard. Sophia's face, in particular, turned a ghastly white, as if all life had been drained from her in that instant. What had she just heard? They wanted Ethan to sever all ties with the Bell family. No, absolutely not. Her baby was due soon. She was so close to fulfilling her sister's dying wish, so close to returning to Ethan as Sophia Bell, telling him the whole truth. They were on the verge of resuming their happy life. But just as her plan was about to come to fruition, the Coles were trying to take her husband away from her. She would absolutely not allow it. No. Unfortunately, Sophia's objection was a feeble whisper against the Coles' unwavering resolve. Ever since they discovered Sophia's true deception, their disgust for her and the entire Bell family had become absolute. They had once believed their son would have a good life married into the Bell family. They never imagined he had fallen into a viper's pit. If only they had known, they would have fought tooth and nail to prevent the marriage. Fortunately, they could still salvage the situation. They were even perversely grateful for Sophia's egregious actions. It gave Ethan legitimate grounds, his wife's death, to make a clean break from the Bells, a far easier process than a contested military divorce. And Sophia and the Bells would have no grounds to entangle their son further. Unless, of course, she revealed her true identity. But that would land her either in a mental institution or prison. Whichever path she chose, it was a living death for Sophia. The Coles had calculated this precisely, choosing Mrs. Bell's birthday banquet to force her hand. If she dared to admit she was Sophia Bell, they would achieve two goals with one stone. Send her and the entire Bell family to hell. What right do you have to object? Huh, Chloe Bell. Mrs. Cole bit out the last two words, her tone heavy with meaning, as if to remind Sophia of her current identity. If you want to talk about widowhood, my son mourned your sister for nearly 2 years. If you want to talk about suffering, my son has endured more than his share. Even if he owed your family anything, he's more than paid that debt by now, wouldn't you say? Furthermore, Mrs. Cole continued, her voice rising, If anyone truly has the right to object, it should be my son's wife, your sister, Sophia Bell. You, a mere sister-in-law, practically a stranger with no familial ties to my son. What grounds do you have to object? No, it's not like that. I am Sophia Bell. Crack boom. Another clap of thunder echoed, and the previously chaotic scene fell into an eerie silence. Everyone stared at Sophia in disbelief, their mouths agape. Had they heard correctly? What had she just said? She claimed to be Sophia Bell. Unbelievable. Mark Jensen, standing nearby, was rooted to the spot in shock, momentarily forgetting the pain in his leg. He disregarded everything else and grabbed Sophia's hand. Chloe, what are you talking about? Yes, even if she wants to keep her brother-in-law, she shouldn't be saying such crazy things. Isn't she afraid her sister's ghost will come looking for her at night? Exactly. I think, Chloe, you've really lost your mind. Mrs. Cole looked at the woman who was so eagerly outing herself and sneered. And what proof do you have that you're Sophia Bell? Everyone present saw Sophia Bell's body with their own eyes. We all saw her coffin being buried. That's right. You can eat whatever you want, but you can't just say whatever you want. Chloe Bell, this is no laughing matter. Sophia stood her ground, hands clenched into fists, her brow furrowed in a tormented struggle. After a long moment, she finally looked up again, her voice low but unshakably firm. I'm Sophia Bell, not Chloe Bell. The person who died that day was my sister, not me. Sophia had overestimated her own endurance. She had planned to reveal the truth only after her child was born. But now, they were trying to force her husband, her Ethan, to leave her. They were closing in, leaving her cornered with no way out. She couldn't lose Ethan. As for Mark, she had been by his side for these past years, and she had given him a child. Even without her, he could live on strongly. Crack boom. The thunder rumbled again, followed by a torrential downpour. Raindrops, like bullets, streamed down the eaves, drumming a deafening tattoo on the awnings, the noise almost drowning out the woman's voice in the crowd. But Mark Jensen, standing right next to Sophia, heard every word with terrifying clarity. His mind went blank, as if struck by lightning. He shook his head in disbelief, stumbling backward a few steps. His knee slammed into the corner of a mahogany table, the dull pain sending him sprawling to the ground. Chloe, you're joking, right? Mark stared at Sophia's face, but under the flickering lights, it seemed to distort, to become blurry. All the questions that had plagued his mind, all the inconsistencies, suddenly had answers. The woman whose personality and preferences had changed so drastically. The woman who frequently showed concern for her widowed brother-in-law, even repeatedly chasing away matchmakers. The woman who, in bed, would look at him with apparent affection, yet always seemed to be looking through him at someone else. The woman who, whenever Ethan was injured, was always the first to rush to his side. The woman who had drunkenly stumbled into Ethan's room. Everything finally made sense. The chandelier swayed precariously in the storm. A broken sob finally escaped Mark. The sound grew louder, a raw, despairing wail, much like Ethan's cries 2 years ago when he learned of his wife's sacrifice. Tragic, hopeless, grief-stricken. The agony of losing his wife, delayed by 2 years, finally caught up to him today. Unable to bear the blow, his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed, unconscious. Sophia reached out to catch him, but the immense shock left her reeling. Then, her vision blackened, and she too crumpled to the ground. Ah, there's so much blood on the floor. Someone's miscarrying. Quick, call an ambulance. The chaos finally subsided with Mark Jensen and Sophia Bell both unconscious. After a night of emergency medical care, Mark was stable. However, the baby Sophia had been carrying was lost. Smack! Mrs. Bell's hand cracked across Sophia's face. You are an absolute fool, she cried, heartbroken. If only Sophia had held on a little longer, just a few more months, the child would have been born, securing a descendant for the Bell family. But no, she had to reveal her secret that day, not only costing the Bells their grandchild, but also dragging the family name through the mud. Now the whole of Oakbridge City knew. The younger Bell daughter had impersonated her sister and slept with her brother-in-law. There was no need for the Coles to press further. The retired general had already made arrangements for Ethan to formally sever all ties with the Bell family. And because the scandal was so enormous, Sophia's own high-ranking military position had been revoked. Losing so much, how could Mrs. Bell not be furious? She raised her hand to strike Sophia again. But Sophia was like a soulless puppet, unresponsive to her mother's blows and tirades. Finally, a nurse emerged from Mark's room, reprimanding them and announcing that the patient inside was awake and asking who would see him. Only then did Sophia seem to snap back to reality. Her voice was a hoarse whisper. "I'll go." After all, Mark was an innocent victim in this. She owed him. She would do her best to make amends. With this thought, she ignored her mother's continued shouts from behind and pushed open the door to Mark's room. The moment the door closed, the clamor from outside was shut out. Sophia looked towards the hospital bed and saw him, a pale man with empty eyes. She clenched her fists, walked towards him, and sat beside his bed. "I'm sorry for what I've done to you. Name whatever compensation you want." Compensation? After a long silence, Mark finally reacted. He slowly turned his head, his gaze settling on her, this woman with bloodshot eyes and an air of utter desolation. Complex emotions swirled in his eyes. How could she possibly compensate him? He had eagerly awaited his wife's return, made love to his wife night after night, and then, with joyful anticipation, helped her conceive a child carrying both their bloodlines. Everything had seemed so perfect, but then she had shattered his beautiful dream, telling him it was all an elaborate lie woven to spare him the pain of losing his wife, to give him a reason, a child, to keep living. Now the lie was exposed. His wife was gone, his child was gone, his reputation was ruined. He had nothing left. How could she compensate him now? Mark's knuckles were white as he gripped the bedsheets. The words squeezed from his throat sounded as if they'd been scraped with sandpaper. "Sophia Bell, the thing you should have done wasn't to offer compensation, but to never have broken this lie. So he could have continued to live in his beautiful dream, to survive, instead of enduring this heart-wrenching agony over and over." Sophia closed her eyes, her voice even weaker. I. All the words she wanted to say fell hollow. The wall clock ticked relentlessly. Only the sound of their breathing filled the room. After what felt like an eternity, Mark spoke again. "Anything I want for compensation?" Sophia paused, then said yes. This time, Mark finally smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "All right then, I want you to marry me." Bang! Sophia shot up from her chair. No, the only man she loved was Ethan Cole. He was the only one she recognized as her husband. She would never marry anyone else. "That's absurd. Ask for something else." "Absurd?" Mark laughed, but his voice was laced with sarcasm. "You think this is absurd?" His voice rose. "Then why didn't you think it was absurd when you arrogantly impersonated your sister, slept with me, and tried to have my child? Do you have any idea what you've done to my reputation? I'll never be able to marry anyone else now. How am I supposed to live?" "I'm telling you, Sophia Bell," he hissed, "for the rest of your life, you can only, and you must, marry me." "No." "Yes, she will." Sophia's protest was cut short by her mother, who had been eavesdropping at the door and now burst in. Mrs. Bell was already distraught over losing one daughter in reputation and one son-in-law, Ethan. The thought of losing a second son-in-law had her frantic, her mouth breaking out in stress sores. Mark's unexpected proposal to marry Sophia was, to Mrs. Bell, a godsend. "Mom." Sophia couldn't believe that even now, her mother was adding to the chaos. "Sophia, dear, our family has already wronged Ethan Cole. We cannot wrong Mark as well. I approve of this. As soon as Mark is discharged from the hospital, you two will go get your marriage license." "Absolutely not. My husband is Ethan, and Ethan alone." Sophia's face hardened. She had already hurt Ethan once. She couldn't continue to hurt him, and she certainly wouldn't marry someone else. "No matter what you think, I only want Ethan." Sophia Bell. Bang! The hospital room door was suddenly thrown open from the outside. Someone rushed in, gasping for breath. Sophia, there's news about Ethan." "Really?" Instantly, Sophia's grim expression vanished, replaced by a flicker of joy. Without a second thought, she rushed out of the room. "Sophia Bell, you stop right there." No matter how loudly her mother shouted from behind, Sophia didn't look back once. Meanwhile, on a southern island, Port Gecko, Ethan had underestimated his constitution. Of the 3-day voyage, he'd been seasick for 2, and the remaining day he'd spent in a groggy, sleep-filled haze. Vera had practically carried him from the ferry to their new home. After nearly 2 weeks confined to bed, Ethan finally regained his strength and took a proper look around his and Vera's new house. It was a charming 2-story dwelling nestled on a hillside, tiled inside and out, and filled with all the necessary furniture and appliances. Fruit trees and vegetable patches thrived in the front and backyards. A fenced-off area beside a fish pond housed a lively flock of chickens and ducks. And by the fish pond, Vera, dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, sat on a small stool, leisurely fishing. Seeing Ethan approach, She quickly grabbed another stool for him. "How are you feeling?" Perhaps due to the change in environment, Ethan had not only lost his appetite these past few days, but had also lost a significant amount of weight. Vera had been heartsick with worry, constantly seeking remedies and trying different recipes to tempt him. Now he finally had the energy to come downstairs and join her. Ethan nodded, settling beside her. Much better. The anxiety Vera had carried for days finally eased. She took Ethan's hand, rubbing it gently, her eyes filled with a touch of remorse. "I shouldn't have chosen this island when I took the overseas assignment." Vera was a foreign correspondent for a major news agency, constantly on the move. This time, she had opted for a posting in the southernmost part of the country, dedicated to sending back the latest reports. At the time she chose Port Gecko, there was another reason. Ethan hadn't yet agreed to her proposal. Vera had thought that if he rejected her, she would go to the farthest place from him, so she wouldn't see him again, wouldn't lose control, and try to win him over. Who knew that just as she signed the assignment papers, Mrs. Gable would inform her that Ethan had agreed to marry her? It was one of life's great joys, and she'd experienced two at once. But her initial elation was now tinged with regret, seeing how Ethan had struggled to acclimate to island life. Ethan squeezed her hand back, smiling. "What's there to regret? I'll adapt. Besides, being stationed on an island like this has always been your dream. As your fiancé, naturally, I'll support your dream wholeheartedly." Speaking of fiancés, Vera pulled him closer. "Speaking of which," she said, her voice soft, "we should start planning our wedding." Because the island they were on was quite remote and difficult for outsiders to access easily. Coupled with their parents' poor health, neither family would be attending the wedding. However, they had already sent generous dowries and wedding gifts. At the mention of the wedding, a blush crept up Ethan's neck. He deliberately teased her. Why the sudden thought about a wedding? Vera chuckled softly, gently kissing his forehead, her eyes filled with a fervent love. "Because I want to marry you, right now. I want to be your wife." This was the wish Vera Stone had cherished most for her 25 years. From the first moment she saw Ethan Cole in high school, her heart had no room for anyone else. Unfortunately, Ethan back then was entirely consumed by his studies, oblivious to romance. Every girl who dared to send him a love letter was met with a polite but firm rejection. At the time, she was both relieved and saddened. Relieved that he didn't like anyone else, saddened that she herself would likely have a hard time winning his affection. But Vera, after careful consideration, decided to gather her courage and confess her feelings to Ethan. Tragically, before she could, their college entrance exams sent them to universities in different cities. By the time Vera next heard news of Ethan, he was already married to Sophia Bell. That night, Vera's apartment floor was littered with empty wine bottles. But she still hadn't given up on him. She waited for an opportunity. Then, finally, she heard that Ethan was a widower. The news sent a thrill of excitement through Vera. She'd wanted to set off fireworks on the spot. Without even informing her parents, she immediately contacted Mrs. Gable to act as a matchmaker. Even though Ethan rejected her proposals multiple times, she finally received the answer she'd longed for. Thinking of this, she hugged the man in her arms even tighter. The next morning, Vera and Ethan got into their SUV and drove along the newly paved coastal highway towards the distant harbor. Because Port Gecko was so remote, many supplies had to be brought in by a monthly ferry. The journey was long, so the ferry could only visit once a month. Thus, the 15th of every month was when the islanders flocked to the supply ferry for market day. Vera kept Ethan close, shielding him from the jostling crowd, as she carefully guided him onto the ferry. Since it had been a while since its last visit, the ferry was laden with a rich variety of goods. One could find almost anything. Shortly after boarding, Vera had already bought a mountain of things. Protein powder, artisanal honey, new summer shirts for him, a designer watch. Almost everything was for Ethan. Her lavish spending made Ethan wince. He quickly took her hand. "Vera, that's enough. It's really too much." Vera smiled, squeezing his hand. "But I don't think it's enough yet. From the moment I fell in love with you, I started saving up. Also, you could have a good life, want for nothing, never have to envy anyone else. Besides," she added, "if I don't spend my money on you, who else would I spend it on? And my family, they have their own money. They even send us funds every year." Seeing her insistence, Ethan didn't argue further. Instead, he proactively bought her a few new dresses and a sturdy bicycle to make her commutes easier. By the time they left, their pickup truck was nearly overflowing with purchases. They ended up strapping some of the larger items to the roof rack for the drive home. A few days later, Ethan and Vera, laden with gifts, paid a formal visit to the island's most respected marriage officiant, requesting him to choose an auspicious date for their wedding. After careful consultation of his almanacs, the officiant set their wedding for 1 month later. With the wedding date fixed, the couple began the busy preparations. The first order of business was to go to the relevant county office to apply for their marriage license. As they both signed their names beneath the declaration, "We wish to enter into a contract of marriage," a strange sense of happiness washed over them. This signified a major step towards becoming husband and wife. After obtaining the marriage license, they hurried to the county clerk's office to file it. Signing the official marriage certificate, both were overcome with emotion. Ethan gazed at the words marriage certificate before him, and his mind inexplicably drifted back to many years ago, when he and Sophia had registered their marriage. Back then, he had never been in a serious relationship and was new to adult life, completely inexperienced with the formalities of marriage. He'd relied entirely on the guidance of the clerk and Sophia. Consequently, when he received the certificate, he felt no joy, only a profound uncertainty about the future. What role was he supposed to play? What was he supposed to do? He was clueless. But Sophia had mistaken his apprehension for nervousness, reassuring him not to worry, that she would help him with everything. And she had kept her word, guiding him from their wedding night through all the complexities of married life. Perhaps her kindness had made him too reliant on her, so much so that when he heard the news of Sophia's death, beyond the overwhelming grief, he was left utterly adrift. He had grown so accustomed to her care. How could he possibly live without her? It could be said that at that time, Sophia was his entire world. That was why he had lost his will to live, why he had sought death. But it was also because of Sophia's death that he had gradually matured, become independent, and discovered that he could, in fact, survive without her, could endure hardships he'd never imagined. Yet, just as Ethan was coming to terms with a life of unforeseen struggles, he stumbled upon Sophia's devastating secret. The revelation had struck him like a thunderbolt. That was why his heart had completely died toward Sophia. To escape her orbit entirely, he had agreed to Vera's proposal. Although he intended to forget the past after marrying Vera and to do his utmost to be a good husband, he thought it would be nearly impossible for him to feel any genuine anticipation or passion for marriage again. But now, at this moment, Ethan realized he was wrong. Perhaps influenced by Vera's unwavering affection these past days, he too felt a surge of excitement, a genuine anticipation for their future life together. He even found himself imagining all the things they would do, the life they would build. At this thought, a happy smile touched Ethan's lips. He bent his head and signed his name on the marriage certificate, then pressed his thumbprint beside it. Vera was equally emotional. Looking at the marriage certificate, she felt lightheaded, as if she were dreaming. To verify its reality, she pinched her thigh hard. The sharp sting brought a delighted, almost goofy grin to her face. Her laugh drew Ethan's gaze. "What's wrong?" Vera, still beaming foolishly, shook her head. "Nothing. I just thought I was still dreaming, so I pinched myself." Pfft. Her antics made Ethan burst out laughing. Soon, guided by the clerk, they sat before a simple blue backdrop for their official marriage photo. Okay, come on now, heads a little closer together." Following the photographer's instructions, Ethan and Vera leaned in, cheek to cheek, both smiling at the camera. Vera's warm breath brushed Ethan's face, bringing a faint blush to his cheeks. He fiddled with the hem of his shirt, too shy to look directly at her. Because they were so close, Vera could clearly hear Ethan's heart pounding, thump thump, thump thump, which made her own heart race, her back straightening nervously. A sheen of perspiration appeared on her skin, and her hands clenched into fists in her pockets. She tried to calm herself, but her heart fluttered like a trapped bird. "Okay, look at the camera." Click. A flash of white light, and the freshly printed marriage photo was affixed to their marriage certificate, then impressed with the official seal of the county clerk's office. The newly married Ethan and Vera thanked the clerk, accepted their certificate, and handed over a bag of celebratory candies they had prepared. Vera held the new marriage certificate, her fingers repeatedly tracing their photograph. The spot where her fingers touched the paper felt coated in a sweet confection, its fragrance filling her senses, igniting a wave of joy throughout her body. The words husband and wife on the certificate seemed to morph into a giant, beaming yes on her retina. The certificate number became a cascade of fireworks in her vision. She felt as if the whole world was cheering for her successful marriage. Her fingertips unconsciously caressed the embossed official seal, like a rose blooming on the page. The unique, slightly rough texture of the certificate paper sent shivers down her skin. her heartbeat thrumming with excitement. Finally, her fingers rested on the date stamped at the bottom, April 20th. This was her wedding day with Ethan, the starting point of her happy life. She had finally achieved her dream. She took a deep breath, trying to suppress the overwhelming emotion surging through her, but the moisture welling in her eyes betrayed her profound joy and excitement. But the elation bubbling inside her was like an unstoppable spring. Vera could no longer contain herself. She threw her arms around Ethan and, laughing with pure joy, began to spin him around in circles. "I'm married. I have a husband." "Whoa, what are you doing?" Ethan exclaimed, caught off guard. "I'm just so happy, Ethan. I finally married you. You're finally my husband." The more she spoke, the more excited she became, drawing the attention of passersby. Several other newlywed couples, hearing Vera's exuberant declaration, chuckled in amusement, their eyes filled with warm wishes. Ethan looked down at her, and in her eyes, which reflected his own image, he saw an overflowing, intense love. It made his own heart pound, a flush creeping up his face. He lowered his gaze slightly, a smile spreading across his features. He, too, was overjoyed to be blessed by fate once more, to marry someone who truly loved him. Night descended, blanketing the island in moonlight. Stars twinkled in the vast expanse of the sky, casting a faint, mesmerizing glow. The September evening breeze rustled through the branches, coaxing some late-blooming flowers to unfurl their petals. Tonight was their wedding night. Ethan had already showered and was lying in bed, while Vera, by contrast, was exceptionally nervous. She sat on the edge of the bed, unable to meet his gaze. Finally, she took several deep breaths, as if having made a momentous decision, and turned to him. "Ethan, maybe we should wait until the actual wedding ceremony day." Once the initial euphoria of receiving the marriage certificate had passed, a wave of nervousness, tinged with a sliver of fear, had washed over Vera. She was terrified that this was all just a dream. But the next moment, a pair of strong hands gently cupped her neck, and a clean, refreshing scent enveloped her as Ethan drew closer. "But Vera," he whispered, his voice a low caress, "we're already husband and wife. And I told you, my heart belongs only to you. I will only love you, be yours alone. Don't you want to possess me?" Vera stared at him, mesmerized, as he leaned over her, his eyes full of playful seduction. Then, he gently pressed her down onto the mattress. "Of course, I want to possess you," she breathed. Ethan captured her left hand, their fingers interlacing tightly, and pressed it gently above her head. He peppered soft, lingering kisses on the corners of her lips. Her dark hair cascaded like a silken river onto the pillow, its blackness a stark contrast against the soft white linen. Her free hand clutched the bedsheet, the knuckles of her curled fingers strikingly elegant. The bedroom curtains were drawn tight, leaving only a single wall lamp lit. Its dim, amber light diffused throughout the room, casting flickering, indistinct shadows of two figures intimately entwined. A night of passionate lovemaking stretched until the break of dawn. Having crossed that final threshold, Ethan and Vera's bond deepened, their affection for each other becoming as inseparable as glue. In the mornings, she would press a gentle kiss to his forehead before leaving for work. In the evenings, returning from her assignments, she would often bring him a small bouquet of wildflowers picked from the roadside. He, in turn, would embrace her at the door before she left, tucking a few pieces of candy and a hard-boiled egg into her pocket, reminding her to eat if she got hungry. At night, he would leave a light on in the living room, keep a warm meal for her in the pot, and sit watching the news or knitting, waiting for her return. During their leisure time, she would often take him on bicycle rides along the scenic coastal road, stopping frequently to enjoy the sea breeze and collect seashells. Finally, as time flowed on, their wedding day arrived. Because Ethan and Vera had already been living together and neither of them cared for elaborate formalities, the wedding was kept simple. On the wedding day, amidst the festive sound of celebratory music and laughter, Vera, radiant in a simple white sundress, rode a classic Schwinn cruiser adorned with red ribbons. Ethan, handsome in a linen shirt and slacks, rode alongside on his own bicycle, both of them beaming as they led a small, joyful parade around the town square. Villagers and friends lined the path, showering them with blessings and flower petals. Attendants tossed handfuls of candy, symbolizing a sweet life, into the cheering crowd. After a lap, they dismounted. Vera, with a playful whoop, insisted on carrying Ethan piggyback style over a small, symbolic bonfire, an old island tradition for good luck, as they headed towards the gaily decorated community hall where the reception was held. Fireworks burst in the afternoon sky, and in the distance, the horn of the arriving supply ferry sounded, as if joining in the celebration. Streams of passengers, like a flowing river, disembarked from the ferry's gangplank onto the bustling port. Among them was Sophia Bell, who had traveled thousands of miles in search of her husband. Ever since she learned that Ethan hadn't returned to his parents' home, but had simply vanished, Sophia had been searching for him like a woman possessed. Finally, after a month, she had found a trace, discovering he had come to this island. Overjoyed at the time, she had immediately tried to buy a ferry ticket. However, she was informed by the authorities that, due to the island's restricted nature, she needed to undergo multiple levels of security clearance. Compounded by the scarcity of tickets, it wasn't until today that she finally set foot on Port Gecko. But once Sophia arrived, she realized the island was vast. Combined with the fact that she had no idea where Ethan had gone after his arrival, finding him seemed more difficult than reaching for the sky. Yet, the words "give up" did not exist in Sophia Bell's vocabulary. So, she planned to inquire about Ethan from the islanders while following any useful lead she could find. With this resolve, Sophia quickened her pace towards a distant town. Just as Sophia was heading up the mountain road on a local shuttle bus, the vehicle suddenly stopped. The passengers swarmed off, excitedly running toward the nearby wedding celebration. Sophia hadn't intended to get off, but a well-meaning fellow passenger grabbed her arm. "Hey, what are you doing just sitting there? Hurry up and go get some wedding candy, sharing the good luck." Before Sophia could react, she was pulled into the throng. Showers of celebratory candy rained down, and at that moment, the wedding ceremony in the nearby house reached its climax. The bride was about to unveil the groom and kiss him, all to the cheers of the guests. Amidst the playful catcalls, the bride gently turned the groom to face her. The curious crowd surged forward, and Sophia, caught in the human tide, was pushed to the front. Gradually, she began to make out the groom's appearance. The first thing that caught Sophia's eye was the groom's handsome black tuxedo, impeccably tailored, accentuating his tall, straight posture. For some reason, Sophia found the groom's silhouette achingly familiar. Then, the groom turned his head, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. The first thing everyone noticed was his handsome face, his deep-set eyes, and his strong, straight nose. Finally, the groom's face, a face so painfully familiar to Sophia, was fully revealed. Boom! When Ethan's face was presented before Sophia, she heard thunder crash in her ears, her mind instantly blank. It was him. It was Ethan Cole, the man she had longed for day and night, the man she had frantically searched for so long. A torrent of images flashed through Sophia's mind. The overwhelming love he had once shown her, his desperate cries before her coffin as he vowed to join her in death, her own countless nights of regret and torment. And now, here he was alive and well, standing before her. When Ethan had disappeared, she had truly gone mad. She had kneeled countless times at the Coles' front gate, endured their cold shoulders and harsh words, suffered her mother's slaps and attempts to drag her away. Yet she had remained unmovable like a mountain. She had begged them, not for forgiveness, but just to tell her where Ethan had gone. But until she collapsed in the rain from a raging fever, the Coles' door had never once opened. Yet Sophia refused to give up. In the end, she had swallowed her pride, even sought help from former rivals, begging them to help find Ethan. And now, she had finally found him. But she had never, ever imagined that her Ethan would be another woman's groom. Why? Why things turn out this way? From the Coles' reactions, she knew Ethan had long been aware of her secret, which was why he had left so angrily. But they had been husband and wife for so long. He had loved her so deeply. Why would he suddenly marry another woman? Had she done something too unforgivable? Was that why he was doing this out of spite? Right now, Sophia's mind was in utter chaos. She couldn't hear or see anything clearly. Seeing that woman about to press her lips to Ethan's, Sophia could no longer control herself. She frantically tried to break free from the dense crowd, pushing with all her might to reach him, oblivious to the astonished stares of the surrounding guests. "No, don't." But her cry was instantly swallowed by the surrounding cacophony. A rising tide of fear gripped Sophia, her voice growing hoarse. Only one thought screamed relentlessly in her mind. She couldn't let that woman kiss him. They couldn't get married. He was hers. Hers. She would pay any price, do anything, to get Ethan back. She had to tell him how much she had missed him during these days of his absence. She had to tell him the truth about everything. She had to tell him it was all over, that she could return to his side, that they could resume their life together. She had to tell him that from now on, she would protect him fiercely, never letting him suffer even the slightest harm again. However, just as Sophia was about to burst from the crowd, two men in green security uniforms suddenly blocked her path. "Sorry, ma'am, you can't go in." One of them extended a hand, his tone polite but firm. Sophia paid him no heed, tried to push past his arm, her voice tight with suppressed urgency. "Let me go. I need to see Ethan Cole. He's my husband." The two security men exchanged a quick, perplexed glance. Ethan Cole was her husband, but their employer, Miss Stone, had only recently told them that Mr. Cole was now the man of the house, and his first wife had died in the line of duty long ago. Even if this woman was trying to falsely claim a connection, why bring up a dead person? One of the guards turned back to Sophia, his voice now carrying a note of warning. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you still cannot enter. If you continue to cause a disturbance, we will have to escort you out." Sophia's face instantly darkened. She had never been refused so persistently. In the past, she would have already lost her temper. But this wasn't the Bell family estate, nor Oakbridge City. No matter how agitated she felt, she had to endure it. With this thought, Sophia clenched her fists and took a deep breath. "I really do know Ethan Cole." Her voice softened. "Could you please just make an exception? Just tell him. Tell him Sophia Bell wants to see him." By the end, Sophia's tone was laced with an undeniable humility and pleading. However, the two security men remained unmoved, like an impassive wall, completely blocking her path to Ethan. The commotion began to attract the attention of the nearby guests, and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some had already recognized Sophia. After all, the scandal of the younger Bell daughter impersonating her sister to seduce her brother-in-law had been sensational news. It had even made headlines in many newspapers and featured on television news broadcasts, so even the residents of this remote island had heard of it. Although Ethan Cole hadn't been on the island for long, it was enough time for them to get a sense of his character. The thought of such a kind and understanding person being treated so cruelly by Sophia ignited the good-hearted islanders' anger, and they all spoke out in his defense. How dare someone like her still show her face and look for Mr. Cole? If I were you, I'd have hung myself by now. What rotten luck, encountering someone like her on such a happy occasion. Tui. The crowd grew angrier with each passing moment, until finally someone couldn't restrain themselves any longer and lashed out. Thwack! A fist shot out, slamming into Sophia's face before she could react. Thud! The Sophia of old could have easily dodged that punch. But now, weakened by her recent ordeals and the exhausting search for Ethan, she lacked her former strength and reflexes. Caught completely off guard, Sophia was knocked to the ground. Before she could even gasp for breath, the crowd surged forward, raining kicks and blows upon her. Under the brutal assault, Sophia almost heard the sickening crack of her own bones. Only when the crowd had vented their anger did they finally release her. Sophia lay on the ground, covered in blood, motionless. After a long moment, she painstakingly raised a hand to wipe the blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. To avoid further disruption to the wedding inside, several strong men from the crowd emerged, grabbed Sophia, and began to drag her away, intending to throw her out. Get lost, get lost. Go far away. Don't you dare bother Mr. Cole again. If we see you here again, we'll beat you every time. Get out. That night, a heavy rain fell again on Port Gecko. Crack boom. A deafening thunderclap, accompanied by a blinding flash of lightning, split the sky, the sheer force of it rattling the window panes. Vera instinctively pulled Ethan closer, covering his ears with her hands. Once she was sure he had drifted back into a deep sleep, she gently released him, slipped out of bed, threw on a robe, and left the room. The moment she stepped outside, umbrella in hand, she saw a lone figure standing in the downpour not far from their gate. Vera's brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She hadn't expected Sophia Bell to still be there, especially so late. After the wedding ceremony today, her father's two security aides had privately informed her that a woman claiming to be Ethan Cole's wife had been trying to force her way in to see him. Vera had immediately known it was Sophia. According to Ethan, even if Sophia were to come looking for him, it should have been months later. Her appearance here, now, could only mean something significant had happened with the Bell family, something that had forced Sophia to reveal her identity. Initially, Vera hadn't been too concerned. Ethan would never go back to someone like Sophia. If Sophia had any sense, she would have quietly disappeared from their lives. But no one had anticipated that Sophia would stand vigil outside their gate for so long. Now, Vera had just found out she was pregnant. Their love story was just beginning. She didn't want Ethan to be affected by such trivial matters. With this thought, she quickened her pace towards the woman in the rain. Outside the Cole residence, Sophia stood motionless in the pouring rain. She was soaked to the bone, her slightly long, disheveled hair plastered to her cheeks. A bone-deep chill wrapped around her, making her tremble uncontrollably. Yet Sophia seemed oblivious to it, her eyes fixed intently on the closed iron gate before her. A whole day. It had been an entire day. From the end of the wedding until now, she had kept watch outside their house. She just wanted to ask Ethan why. Why had he suddenly left her without any warning? Why had he suddenly married someone else? She had told him, she had promised that after her child was born, she would return to his side, and they would rebuild their life together. Why couldn't he have just waited a little longer for her? Just as Sophia's mind churned in a chaotic whirl, the tightly shut iron gate creaked open from the inside. A figure holding an umbrella slowly walked towards her. Instantly, Sophia's vacant eyes lit up. Without waiting for the person to reach her, she rushed forward. Ethan! But when a large black umbrella was tilted back, it revealed the face of an unfamiliar woman. Crack! Another bolt of lightning tore across the sky, momentarily illuminating the darkness. This time, Sophia finally saw clearly the woman who had stolen her Ethan. It's you. In that instant, Sophia finally remembered who the woman before her was. A long time ago, shortly after the news of her sacrifice had spread, matchmakers had begun to call on Ethan. One particular matchmaker had visited a full 7 times. No matter how Sophia, as Chloe, had tried to send her away, it was no use. It was through that matchmaker that she had seen Vera Stone's name and photograph. No, wait. Even before that matchmaker, she had briefly encountered Vera. It was the day she had accompanied the general to visit Vera's influential grandfather. That woman had hurried down the stairs, nodded a curt greeting to them, and then rushed out the door. Though it was just a fleeting glance, Sophia had sensed an inexplicable hostility from Vera even then. At the time, she hadn't understood it, but now it all made a horrifying kind of sense. So, Vera Stone had been coveting her husband even back then. You're asking for it. A furious rage surged through Sophia. She swung her fist, aiming for Vera Stone's face. Vera sidestepped Sophia's punch with swift agility and countered with a sharp jab that landed squarely on Sophia's cheek. Thwack! Unlike the loving, gentle demeanor she showed Ethan, Vera was now cold, composed, her brow furrowed, her dark eyes narrowed dangerously. If Sophia was going to be like this, Vera wouldn't hold back either. The black umbrella fell to the muddy ground, splashing dirty water everywhere. Lightning repeatedly tore across the sky as the two women, like maddened animals, exchanged blows. But it was mostly a one-sided affair, with Vera systematically pummeling Sophia. Within moments, Sophia's face was a bloody mess. Pale and gasping, she leaned heavily against the gate, the stark white flashes of lightning repeatedly illuminating her ravaged features. The blood pooling around her was quickly washed away by the relentless rain. She tried to push herself up but couldn't move an inch, excruciating pain radiating through every nerve in her body. Only then did Vera lower her fists. She calmly took a handkerchief from her pocket, meticulously wiping the blood from her knuckles. Finally, she retrieved the fallen black umbrella, wiped off the mud, and opened it again. Sophia Bell, Vera said, her voice devoid of emotion, don't come back here again. I'm carrying his child. If anything happens to my baby, Ethan won't forgive you. And if you insist on seeing him, Vera added, her tone hardening, I'll have no choice but to call the Bell family and inquire just how they raised their daughter. Pregnant. Sophia, whose head had been bowed in defeat, snapped her gaze upward. You? What did you just say? Who's pregnant? Her voice was a ragged whisper. Whose? Whose child? Vera snorted contemptuously. Mine, of course. The words were like an invisible, giant hand brutally ripping open Sophia's chest. An icy wind howled through the gaping wound, freezing her to the core. She couldn't see, couldn't hear. Even her frantically beating heart seemed to lurch to a dead stop. She remained rooted to the spot, stunned, while a violent storm raged within her. Before coming to this island, before all these secrets were exposed, she had still harbored the hope that once she returned to Ethan, they would have many children together. That way, he wouldn't have to resent Mark Jensen anymore. But now, her gaze was fixed, burning, on Vera Stone standing before her. The woman who had just calmly, word by word, informed her that she was pregnant, and with Ethan's child. In an instant, Sophia felt as if her heart had been hacked into pieces, then ground into a bloody pulp. Her breathing became rapid and heavy, her chest heaving violently, as if each breath brought a fresh wave of tearing pain. From Ethan's unannounced disappearance to witnessing him marry and start a family with another woman, all these events screamed one undeniable truth. Ethan truly didn't want her anymore. The web of lies she had so carefully woven for herself finally, irrevocably, shattered in that moment. Vaguely, she remembered their wedding night. Ethan, his expression earnest, had told her that if she ever betrayed him, he would leave her forever. At the time, she had overestimated his love for her, dismissing his vow as a mere joke. That was why she had repeatedly deceived herself, telling herself that her actions with Mark Jensen were justified, that she was doing it for her sister, to ensure her brother-in-law could live on, to provide an heir for the Bell family, for her sister. She had merely sacrificed their small family unit temporarily for the sake of the larger one. Once everything was settled, she would tell Ethan the whole truth. Ethan, so understanding, would surely comprehend and support her. But now, everything was telling her she was wrong. Horribly, catastrophically wrong. A self-mocking sound escaped Sophia's lips, quickly swallowed by the roar of the rain. Across from her, Vera had no more patience for this kind of person. She turned without hesitation and went back into the house. The moment the cold iron gate clanged shut in front of Sophia, she collapsed completely, her face pressed against the icy ground, tears mingling with the rain. Her shoulders trembled violently as a long-suppressed sob finally tore from her throat, a sound so faint in the downpour, yet filled with an immeasurable ocean of sorrow and despair. Ethan. Inside the coal house, it remained warm and spring-like, untouched by the frigid weather outside. Vera, having changed her clothes, pushed open the bedroom door to find her husband just sitting up in bed, rubbing his eyes sleepily and asking where she'd been. Vera's steps faltered. The scene outside flashed through her mind, her expression darkening for a moment. Then, as if nothing had happened, she walked over, hugged him, and kissed him. Nowhere special, just went down to the harbor to get you some snacks. Hearing this, Ethan's eyes widened. He glanced outside. It's raining so hard. What if you catch a cold? Don't worry, I'm perfectly healthy. Besides, she added, placing a hand on her stomach, her eyes softening, our baby was craving something, and as a mother, I have to satisfy those cravings. At the mention of the baby, Ethan also reached out, his gaze gentle as he looked at her belly. He'd never imagined he would one day be a father. After Sophia's death, the trauma had taken a toll on his health. Combined with everything that happened afterward, doctors had even said it would be very difficult for him to conceive a child. Yet, against all odds, that 1 in a million chance had happened. Ethan cherished this hard-won child immensely. Consequently, he paid little attention to outside matters. Whatever Vera said, he accepted, having no desire to pry further. And Vera, knowing this about Ethan, had been meticulous in keeping Sophia's arrival on the island and her attempts to see him a complete secret. She didn't want her husband to be hurt by that woman again. After dinner, Vera stayed by Ethan's side until he was sound asleep, then quietly went downstairs. Due to her pregnancy, both her family and Ethan's had arranged for several people to help care for them. Seeing her descend, the housekeeper who had been standing by the window came over to greet her. "Ma'am." Vera nodded. "Is she still out there?" The housekeeper replied quickly. "She's been standing there for almost another whole night, ma'am." Vera sneered. "Don't bother with her anymore. Whatever happens to her is none of our concern." Then she instructed the housekeeper. "I've been having some morning sickness lately. Please make the meals plainer, not too oily. The cured ham and bamboo shoots the coals sent last time can be made into a soup. That should be fine." "Yes, ma'am." After the housekeeper left, Vera went to the landline phone and dialed a number. "Hello. Please connect me to the Bell residence." "Thank you." Although Vera no longer paid attention to Sophia, Ethan couldn't stay cooped up at home forever. He would eventually want to go out to work. So, to prevent Sophia from causing further disturbances, she made a call to the Bell family, demanding they come and take Sophia away. "You have 1 month at most. Otherwise, I'll have to escort Sophia Bell back myself." As she said this, a ruthless glint flashed in Vera's eyes. Another rainy night. Sophia had lost count of how many days she had stood outside the coal house. She could clearly feel her body nearing its breaking point, yet she still hadn't seen Ethan. Soon, the rain intensified. The lights in the coal house went out one by one. As the last light was extinguished, the light in Sophia's eyes also faded completely. She knew today was another fruitless vigil. Her heart felt hollowed out, leaving only an endless despair and an icy chill. Vera's words echoed in her ears again, but she just couldn't accept it. She and Ethan had once loved each other so deeply. When she had died, he had even wanted to join her in death. Yet now, he wouldn't even grant her a single meeting. A bitter laugh escaped Sophia's lips. She looked up at the pitch-black sky, raindrops lashing her face, as if even the heavens were mocking her. Thud! No longer able to stand, her vision blackened, and she crumpled heavily to the ground. The rain continued its merciless assault, as if determined to drown both her and him in this cold, unforgiving world. In a daze, she thought she heard someone anxiously calling her name. Sophia. In a hospital room, Sophia, delirious with fever, had a dream. And it was Ethan, whom she hadn't seen in what felt like an eternity. He held her in his arms, just like before, tenderly calling her name. But just as she was about to lift her head to kiss him, the Ethan in her arms suddenly transformed, his face contorting, and he violently pushed her away, embracing another woman. No matter how much she pleaded, he ignored her. Sophia Bell, you betrayed me first, so I don't want you anymore. He walked away with such finality, never once looking back. No, don't go. Sophia's eyes snapped open. She screamed, her hands flailing wildly. Then, her palm touched something soft. Still not fully conscious, she thought it was Ethan. A wave of joy washed over her, and she immediately pulled him into her embrace, kissing him and begging, don't go, don't leave me, I beg you. Mark Jensen, who had endured a miserable multi-day ferry journey to reach Port Gecko, never imagined his reunion with Sophia would be like this. Initially, when Mark learned that the woman he had shared his bed with for nearly 2 years was not his wife, but his sister-in-law, his world had collapsed. A widower involved in an incestuous affair with his sister-in-law. Whether he was an active participant or a victim, he would be drowned in public scorn, possibly even sent to a labor camp by the authorities. Mark had fought so hard to escape the living death of his own family's dysfunctional dynamics and build a decent life. To go back to that, or worse, he might as well be dead. He had thought it, and he had intended to do it. His reputation was ruined. His own family didn't want him. Sophia Bell didn't want him. What was the point of living? But just as Mark was about to end his life, Mrs. Bell had burst in, desperately stopping him. She cried that the Bell family had already wronged him enough. If they drove him to his death, they would lose all face. So Mrs. Bell had taken it upon herself to decree that Sophia would marry him. Sophia's opposition, however, had been fierce. To make them give up, she had fled to Port Gecko to try and win Ethan back. Undeterred, Mrs. Bell had immediately bought Mark a ferry ticket to the island, arranged the necessary travel permits, and told him that if he brought Sophia back, they would practically drag the county clerk to their home to issue a marriage license on the spot. In the past, Mark would never have accepted marrying his sister-in-law, but he and Sophia had been a couple for nearly 2 years. Not only had his body grown accustomed to hers, but his heart had also slowly begun to hold a place for her. Since his reputation was already destroyed, perhaps marrying her and having children wasn't the worst option. At least his future would have some semblance of security. So Mark had come. He had prepared himself for various reactions from Sophia upon seeing him. But he had never, ever imagined that the moment they met, she would be so frenzied. She clung to him tightly, kissing him wildly, begging him not to leave her. Her passionate display momentarily disoriented Mark, as if they had returned to those 2 years of sweet intimacy. A blush crept up his face at the thought, and he reached up to encircle her neck, intending to kiss her back. But the next moment, Sophia suddenly cried out another man's name to him. Ethan, don't go, please. Splash. The name Ethan was like a bucket of ice water poured over Mark's head, chilling him to the bone. In an instant, a complex mix of unspeakable shame, anger, and betrayal surged through him. He had already considered himself hers. Why did she have to call out another man's name? At this thought, he could no longer bear it. With a strength he didn't know he possessed, he shoved Sophia away. Sophia Bell, you look closely. Who do you think I am? Sophia, who had been passionately kissing Ethan, was momentarily stunned by the push. Confused, she reached out to grab Mark's hand again. Ethan, don't be angry, okay? I can explain everything. Sophia Bell. Another desperate roar. This time, Sophia finally registered it. She shook her head, her vision clearing, and finally saw who was standing before her. In an instant, the madness and passion drained from her face, leaving only a chilling indifference. What are you doing here? Gazing at Sophia's detached, cold tone, a pang of bitterness shot through Mark Jensen. He dug his nails into his palms, then finally relayed Mrs. Bell's decision to her, word for word. Upon hearing her mother intended for her to marry Mark, Sophia's expression instantly hardened. Her eyes held no warmth, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. And you? You're eager to marry me. Mark looked at the face before him, identical to that of his deceased wife, and a strange impulse made him nod. A large part of why he had agreed to marry Chloe Bell all those years ago was because of that face. Even if this Sophia didn't love him, having this face beside him, perhaps later having a child who resembled her, it wouldn't be a total loss. But he couldn't say that aloud. I've told you, with my current reputation, no one else would be willing to marry me. If I don't marry you, who can I marry? Sophia listened to his predictable reply, a profound weariness settling over her. If she had known back then that trying to give Mark a reason to live, to grant her sister peace, by impersonating Chloe and sleeping with him to conceive a child would lead to so much trouble, she would never have done it. She leaned back against the headboard, closing her eyes and rubbing her temples, her voice laced with helplessness. But you know perfectly well I don't love you, and I could never marry you. Any kindness I showed you before was entirely because of my sister. Besides, she added, her voice firming slightly, I came to Port Gecko to win Ethan back, to be his wife again. Ever since Ethan Cole had entered her life, Sophia had eyes for no one else. Hearing Sophia say this, Mark felt a surge of bitter irony. Since arriving on the island, he had made it a point to inquire about Ethan Cole's situation. The man was not only married to Vera Stone, but his new wife was also pregnant. Their relationship was reportedly as strong as glue, unbreakable. To say he wasn't jealous would be a lie, but Mark had no time to envy Ethan. His immediate priority was to get Sophia Bell firmly under his control. Therefore, he chose to shatter her delusions. Stop dreaming. You can't win him back. And speaking of being a couple, you and I spent more time in bed together than you and he did during your entire marriage. Wasn't it true? When Sophia and Ethan were newlyweds, they were often separated by her deployments. Not long after, the incident occurred. And after her return, she had consistently shared his bed. Furthermore, Mark pressed on, his voice a low growl. We almost had a child together. Sophia Bell, no man would ever want someone like you back. No one except me. It was unclear which word triggered her, but Sophia, who had been relatively calm, suddenly erupted. She grabbed the nearest object, a water pitcher, and hurled it at Mark. Enough. Get out of my sight. Get out. Meanwhile, Ethan Cole remained oblivious to the drama unfolding between Sophia and Mark. Under Vera's attentive care, his health had improved significantly. After nearly a month cooped up at home, he was finally able to go out for walks. Seized by a whim, he coaxed Vera into accompanying him to town to check out the newly opened department store, intending to pick up some clothes and formula for their baby on the way. Since the department store wasn't too far, they decided to walk, strolling leisurely down the mountain road. Along the way, Ethan was like a bird freed from its cage, looking here and there with delight. Vera didn't restrain him, merely staying close, ensuring his safety. Inside the department store, they headed straight for the baby product section on the second floor. Unsure if their baby would be a boy or a girl, they bought 2 sets of everything. But when they took their pile of goods to the counter to pay, the cashier informed them that someone had already settled their bill. Ethan and Vera exchanged a puzzled glance. They hadn't helped anyone recently, nor could they think of anyone who would be so kind as to anonymously pay for their expensive purchases. Initially, Ethan thought the cashier was joking, but when presented with the paid receipt, they had no choice but to believe it. The couple initially dismissed it as an odd coincidence. Perhaps a friend had spotted them, but didn't have time to greet them properly, and chose this way to say hello. They figured they would ask around later and thank the person then. However, this pattern repeated itself wherever they went. Every time they selected items to purchase, they would find the bill already paid. Over time, Ethan grew increasingly uneasy. He looked at Vera with concern, his mind conjuring various unsettling scenarios. What if someone was deliberately trying to frame them or entangle them in something illicit? Compared to Ethan's apprehension, Vera remained remarkably calm. From these incidents, she had already formed a strong suspicion about who was responsible. Moreover, she had just caught a glimpse of a familiar figure, which further confirmed her suspicions. With this in mind, she reassured Ethan and then suggested they have lunch at a newly opened restaurant. While waiting for their food, Vera made a casual excuse, telling Ethan to start eating without her, promising she'd be right back. In a narrow alleyway nearby, Vera sent Sophia sprawling with a well-aimed kick. Her expression was cold, her dark eyes narrowed with a simmering anger. It was you, wasn't it? Sophia, whose body hadn't fully recovered, had secretly discharged herself from the hospital. A single kick was enough to leave her without the strength to get up from the ground. Yet, despite her physical state, her face wore an expression of defiant certainty. So what if it was? I told you, Ethan is my husband. A thief like you can't steal him away. To resolve the troublesome Mark Jensen situation quickly, and to expedite her efforts to win Ethan back, Sophia had slipped out of the hospital unnoticed. After much searching and asking around, she had finally located the man she yearned for, Ethan, and the woman by his side, Vera. Unlike the haggard man she had first encountered upon her return, Ethan now exuded a certain paternal glow. Vera's visibly pregnant belly was like a razor-sharp knife twisting in Sophia's heart, the bitter taste of blood rising in her throat. But Sophia forced herself to swallow the bitterness. After all, she had been the first to have a child with someone else. Now, she was willing to accept his child with another woman. She would even raise this child as her own. But all this was contingent on Ethan being willing to leave with her. So, to persuade him, she had devised this plan to lure Vera away. However, before she could approach Ethan, Vera, having discovered her scheme, had found her first. Vera was astounded by Sophia's audacity. Without wasting any more words, she drew back her fist to strike. But just then, a massive explosion roared from a distance. Boom! Vera's fist froze in midair. She turned her head in disbelief and saw the restaurant where she had left Ethan engulfed in roaring flames, thick black smoke billowing like a monstrous hand, shrouding the entire building. Ethan! A chilling shriek tore from her throat. She sprinted towards the inferno like a mad woman, completely oblivious to Sophia, who, her own face deathly pale, struggled to her feet and staggered after her. The sky, lit by the terrifying glow of the fire, was filled with the sounds of people crying, screaming, a cacophony of noises that made Vera's head throb. An overwhelming wave of regret washed over her, and she struck her own face hard twice. If only she had known. She should never have left Ethan alone. If anything happened to Ethan, she wouldn't want to live either. With this thought, she ran with renewed frenzy, determined to plunge into the raging fire. Boom! Another violent explosion ripped through the air, sending debris and shrapnel flying like deadly arrows in all directions. Ma'am, calm down. It's too dangerous in there. You'll be killed if you go in. We've already called 911. The firefighters and rescue teams will be here any minute. Let me go. My husband is still in there. He's not well. Vera's eyes were bloodshot, and she fought with frantic desperation to break free from their grasp. Her mind was a complete blank, consumed by the single thought. Ethan was still inside. He absolutely could not come to any harm. Get away from me. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, she tore herself free from the restraining hands and lunged towards the flames. Ma'am! Boom! Yet another massive explosion. The shockwave sent the entire group sprawling, and the scene descended further into chaos. But amidst the pandemonium, a figure had already surreptitiously slipped into the burning building from another side. Sophia, close behind, heard that Ethan was trapped in the fire. Instantly, all thoughts of her own safety vanished. Without a moment's hesitation, she plunged into the inferno. Although she had some experience with rescue operations in fiery conditions from her military service, the blaze consuming the restaurant was far too fierce. Through the billowing black smoke, she could make out fleeting silhouettes of people, hands clapped over their mouths, tears streaming down their faces. Coughing fits echoed all around. Charred figures, flames licking at their clothes, ran frantically, their desperate cries lost in the roar of the fire. Sophia, having had no time to take any precautions, was quickly enveloped by the flames. She stumbled through the collapsing structure, embers burning at her feet, a relentless wall of fire chasing her from behind. The searing heat slammed into her like a physical force, as if she had been cast into the depths of a terrifying hell. Thick smoke poured into her mouth and nose, choking her, making her eyes stream and her head spin dizzily. She could barely see what was in front of her. Her exposed skin was already blistering from the intense heat, the burning pain tearing at her nerves, slowing her steps. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spotted a familiar figure huddled on the ground, motionless. The flicker of hope that had just ignited in her heart was instantly extinguished by a new wave of terror. Sophia, forgetting everything else, lunged towards the figure. Suddenly, a section of the burning ceiling, its supports severed by the fire, tore loose and came crashing down towards the motionless form. Ethan! Sophia screamed, throwing herself over him. The next moment, the heavy, flaming debris slammed onto her back. Thud! Instantaneously, Sophia's vision went black, and she lost consciousness. In a hospital room, Mark Jensen stared at the woman on the bed, her body almost entirely swathed in bandages, his eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. He knew Sophia still loved Ethan Cole, but he had never imagined she loved him to this extent. Loved him enough to drag her unhealed body out of the hospital to try and win him back. Loved him enough to risk her own life, to charge into an inferno to save him, even if the person she saved merely resembled Ethan from behind. The more Mark thought about it, the tighter his fists clenched. Even as his fingernails dug deep into his palms, piercing the skin and drawing blood, he felt no pain. He stared unblinkingly at Sophia. And then, he remembered the letter Mrs. Bell had sent him a short while ago. The letter implied that Mrs. Bell feared he alone wouldn't be able to bring Sophia back, and that the Bell family would soon send reinforcements to help him. However, Mrs. Bell hoped that before the Bell family contingent arrived on the island, he could manage to sleep with Sophia again. Ideally, she would get pregnant from a single encounter, thereby giving them another, stronger bargaining chip to force the marriage. Thinking of this, Mark unconsciously touched his pocket. Inside was the small packet of medicine Mrs. Bell had sent along with the letter. As for its intended use, Mark knew better than anyone. He had even already decided where and when to use it. Sophia Bell, you wronged me first, he thought, a cold resolve hardening his features. So don't blame me for doing this to you. Sophia remained unconscious for a full week. When she finally awoke, her first question, directed at Mark Jensen, who sat vigil by her bedside, was not about how long he had been there for her. Instead, she asked about Ethan Cole's condition. Upon learning that the person she had rescued was not Ethan, and that Ethan himself had escaped the fire unharmed much earlier, she was first stunned, then seemed to lose all her strength, collapsing back onto the pillows. Yet, a faint, undeniable smile of relief touched her lips. That smile was like a needle pricking Mark's eyes, and it solidified his grim determination to use the drug on her. Hearing that Ethan was also in the same hospital, Sophia, despite her own grievous injuries, insisted on getting out of bed to see him. This time, Mark did not try to stop her. He merely watched her leave in a wheelchair she demanded, his mind replaying the scene of the fire. When he'd heard that Sophia had single-handedly rushed into the blaze to save Ethan, Mark had been, in truth, more tormented than anyone. By the time he reached the scene of the fire, Sophia was already deep inside. Frantic, he had searched desperately for rescue personnel. It was then that he saw, not far away, Ethan Cole, the man who should have been trapped in the fire, being tightly embraced and kissed by a relieved Vera Stone. After the initial shock, a strange surge of anger and sorrow had washed over Mark. How would Sophia react if she knew that the man she was risking her life to save had already escaped and was being held and kissed by another woman? Just as he was about to confront them, Vera Stone had seen him. After calming Ethan and ensuring he was safely in an ambulance, she had walked over to Mark and proposed a collaboration. Their mutual goal, to make Sophia Bell completely give up on Ethan Cole. Mark had agreed. The first step was to let Sophia overhear Ethan declaring that he was completely and utterly done with her, that he would never take her back. As predicted, when Sophia, in her wheelchair, reached Ethan's hospital room and was about to knock, she heard Vera's voice from within mention her name. Ethan, there's something I want to talk to you about. It's about Sophia Bell. Instantly, Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Her outstretched hand froze in midair. She hadn't appeared before Ethan in so long. She had no idea how he felt about her now. Was it hatred or something else? But then, Ethan's voice, calm and distant, drifted through the closed door. Everything's fine. Why burn her up? Those few words struck her heart like a physical blow, and an agonizing pain spread through her entire body. He didn't even want to hear her name mentioned anymore. The conversation inside continued, Ethan's tone remaining consistently tranquil, as if he were discussing a stranger's story. I told you, from the moment I agreed to marry you, she became irrelevant to me. And as far as I'm concerned, Sophia Bell died in that mission. Everything that happened after that, well, let's just call it retribution for my own blindness. My eyes are open now. I have no intention of paying any more attention to her or anything related to her. I just want to live my life peacefully with you. So, you don't hate her anymore? Vera asked. Ethan scoffed. Why would I waste my time arguing with a dead person? Those brief sentences, those few callous words, shattered Sophia's already fragile heart into a million irreparable pieces. Her face deathly pale, she closed her eyes. Her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, were white-knuckled from the force of her grip, making her look like a silent, frozen statue. Later that night, Sophia's small, temporary room was thick with a reek of cheap whiskey. She lay slumped on the floor, her eyes glazed, a bottle dangling from her hand. Empty bottles littered the space around her. She gulped down more alcohol, repeatedly crying out Ethan's name, bitter tears of regret mingling with the whiskey, pouring down her throat. The bitterness was like 1,000 tiny needles piercing her entire body, the pain making it difficult to breathe. She could no longer hold herself up and collapsed heavily onto the floor. Thud! The impact shattered another bottle, the spilled liquid blurring her vision. In her drunken haze, she thought she saw Ethan slowly push open the door and walk towards her, just like when they were newly married, calling her name, holding her tight. Believing she was dreaming, she let go of all inhibitions. She lunged, pulling him into her embrace, and kissed him deeply, only to taste an overwhelming bitterness. Her alcohol-saturated mind was a chaotic mess. She only registered that he seemed to be crying, so her lips frantically moved to his eyes, kissing away his tears, murmuring soothingly, "Shoo, there, don't cry, I'm here." In the cool night, a light rain began to fall. The wind picked up, and the sound of the rain grew louder, gradually concealing the man's muffled grunts and the woman's moans emanating from the room. After a night of what she believed was passionate reunion, Sophia awoke with a splitting headache. She forced her eyes open, only to find herself lying in the arms of a man, both unfamiliar and horrifyingly familiar. Her smooth, rounded shoulder was covered in angry red marks, a clear testament to the previous night's activities. Instantly, Sophia's eyes widened in horror, her mind momentarily blanking out. Just then, the man in her arms groaned softly, slowly lifting his head to smile at her. Sophia. The tranquil morning shattered into a million pieces. Sophia could not believe that she, of all people, had been drugged and manipulated by Mark Jensen. Fury blazed through her, swiftly followed by a tidal wave of despair. The time she had slept with Mark before, it had been, in her twisted logic, to fulfill her sister's dying wish to give Mark a child. Now, with her heart set on winning Ethan back, sleeping with Mark again meant that any possibility of reconciliation with Ethan was utterly and irrevocably gone. Ethan, who valued fidelity so highly, how could he ever want her back, knowing she had been with another man again? She could no longer maintain her composure. She lunged, her hands closing around Mark's throat, her voice raw with rage. "Are you trying to die?" But the harder she squeezed, the louder and more maniacal Mark's laughter became. Finally, with a cry of disgust, Sophia threw him onto the floor. He coughed violently a few times, then looked up at her, his eyes cold. "Sophia Bell, wake up. Stop dreaming. From the moment you presumptuously faked your death and played your sister, sleeping with me, you and him were finished. Besides," he added, a cruel glint in his eyes, "who knows, you might already be carrying my child again. Enough. You're insane." Sophia slapped him hard across the face, a wave of profound regret washing over her. If only she had known. If she had known then that her actions would lead her to this hellish predicament, she would never have softened, never have agreed to help Mark Jensen. The force of the slap made Mark gag, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. The crimson stained his pale lips, making him look even more crazed and terrifying. "Sophia Bell, I'm warning you one last time. If we are not legally married within 3 days, those photos will be delivered into his hands by my associates. And then, he too will be dragged into your disgrace, reviled by everyone. And his child." Mark's eyes flashed with a vicious glint. "So, just accept your fate. Just like him. Accept fate." Sophia stared at him, motionless. Her mind raced, desperately searching for a solution, but in the end, she found herself utterly trapped. From the moment she had overheard Ethan's words outside his hospital room, the last vestiges of any bond between them had been severed. Now, if Mark truly carried out his threat, Ethan would be completely and finally alienated from her. She had already disappointed him, hurt him enough. She couldn't let it continue. Since it had come to this, why didn't she just... Sensing her murderous intent, Mark offered a chillingly calm reminder. "Don't forget your parents." Her clenched fists slowly relaxed. Sophia's previously straight back slumped in utter defeat. A smirk of satisfaction touched Mark's lips. He knew. Sophia Bell had finally conceded. 3 days later, members of the Bell family arrived on Port Gecko to escort Sophia and Mark home. Seeing the two of them hand in hand, and the marriage certificate clutched in Mark's grasp, The Bell family members exchanged glances and collectively breathed a sigh of relief. The ferry's horn blared, and thick black smoke billowed from its funnel. Sophia stood on the deck, her fingers tracing the simple gold band on her hand, her eyes filled with a bitter sadness. Years ago, when she and Ethan had married, she had spent half a year's salary to have this wedding ring custom-made for him. When she had slipped it on Ethan's finger, Sophia, usually so strong, had cried like a child. She had whispered countless sweet nothings to him then, made so many vows. But in the end, she had broken every single one of those vows. Even the most fundamental trust between husband and wife, she had been the first to shatter. So, her current predicament was entirely her own doing. She deserved it. Finally, she pulled the ring from her finger and, with a desolate gesture, tossed it into the churning sea. Along with it, she mentally buried the marriage she herself had destroyed. Ethan, goodbye. We will never meet again. Back at the Cole residence on Port Gecko, Vera learned of Sophia and Mark's marriage and departure. A genuine smile of relief, the first in days, spread across her face. Finally, that woman was gone for good. No one would be trying to steal her husband anymore. Thinking this, she leaned over and planted several firm kisses on Ethan, who was sleeping soundly. He stirred, swatting at her playfully. What's gotten into you now? Ever since she became pregnant, Vera's moods have been wonderfully unpredictable. Vera, still beaming, just chuckled. Nothing really, just that an annoying fly has finally been swatted away. Ethan rolled his eyes good-naturedly, pulled her close, and closed his eyes again, a faint smile playing on his lips. In truth, he had known for a while that Vera was keeping things from him, things related to Sophia. He had even seen Sophia frantically trying to reach him at their wedding. But he had already, truly, let her go, so he hadn't cared. He had also been aware when Vera, thinking he was asleep, had gone out to deal with matters concerning Sophia. He even knew about the apology letter Sophia had written to him before she left, a letter Vera had torn up without showing him. But none of it mattered to him, because he loved Vera. He knew she did what she did to protect him and their unborn child. He genuinely didn't care about Sophia anymore. Whether she lived or died was irrelevant to him. All he wanted now was to cherish the woman beside him and to build a happy life with her and their future child. That was all. He asked for nothing more. 7 months later, Ethan and Vera's daughter was born. Perhaps because this child was such a precious, unexpected gift, they named her Amy Faith Cole. Amy for beloved, and Faith for the miracle she represented. She was their most treasured gift. The baby was immediately showered with attention and love. On the day of Amy's 1-month celebration, both sets of parents traveled thousands of miles to Port Gecko to celebrate with them. Along with generous gifts came a letter. Mrs. Cole looked at her daughter-in-law, Vera, and sighed heavily. I originally didn't want to give this to you, but Mrs. Bell pleaded with me relentlessly. You know Ethan's temperament. Mrs. Cole continued. I don't want to upset him. Just read this letter, then burn it. Don't tell him about it. After Sophia's scandalous deception, faking her death, impersonating her sister, and sleeping with her brother-in-law, was exposed, the Cole family had severed all ties with the Bells. Seeing them again now, so much had changed. It was a world of difference. Vera nodded, taking the letter from Mrs. Cole and moving to a quiet corner to read it. She had expected another one of Sophia's sentimental missives to Ethan, but to her surprise, it was an apology. The letter detailed how Sophia, upon returning home, had been plagued by constant nightmares. In her dreams, she relived the day of her sister's death countless times, desperately trying to change her fate, always failing. The prolonged nightmares had taken their toll, and she had been diagnosed with a severe mental illness, often confusing Mark with Ethan. Initially, Mark, thinking of their child, had tried to endure it. But when Sophia began insisting their son call a photograph of Ethan daddy, Mark had finally snapped. A violent confrontation had ensued, leaving both of them grievously injured. Sophia's legs were permanently damaged, leaving her partially paralyzed. Mark was blinded in one eye and had also succumbed to mental illness. As for the child conceived through Mark's drug manipulation, the trauma had rendered him mute, and he was later diagnosed with a severe heart condition, becoming a fragile child reliant on constant medication from a young age. Sophia's letter was not a plea for pity, but an apology. She wrote that she was deeply sorry for what she had done to Ethan and dared not ask for his forgiveness. Her only wish was for him to live a peaceful and happy life, and for all his past and future suffering to be transferred to her instead. Vera snorted contemptuously and, without a second thought, tossed the letter into the fireplace. In the distance, Ethan was holding their daughter, Amy, and waving to her. Vera walked quickly towards them, embracing her husband and child tightly. Ethan, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, I am so incredibly lucky to have you and Amy. Ethan smiled gently, taking her hand. I'm lucky too, to have met you and Amy.